Hey, my name is Kaylee. Thank you so much for clicking on this video. This is Read Rant Review, where, you guessed it, I read books and I do rant reviews. That means I give you a chapter by chapter, beat by beat breakdown of a book. Typically on Thursdays, I do books that you guys vote for. Today we're doing something a little bit different, and we're continuing my casual classics series where I read classical literature and then I give you the same type of video format, but for these really old books. Today specifically, we are wrapping up our Bronte sister exploration, and we're going to be talking about The Tenant of Wildfell Hall by Anne Bronte. She's the youngest of the three sisters and the least known. I covered Jane Eyre and Wuthering Heights over the last couple of weeks, and the opening of specifically Jane Eyre, I talk in a lot more details about the sisters and their history and everything if you're curious. Really, for this one, the only thing to note, just in general, is this was the second book that Anne ever published. She died within a year of publication, and then her eldest sister, Charlotte, who wrote Jane Eyre, right? She lived on for quite a few years, like 6, not even that many, but she lived on for quite a few years, made the executive decision to not publish The Tenant of Wildfell Hall any longer. She said that it wasn't an accurate representation of Anne, that it was like just troublesome in general, and so pulled it. And so that's the other reason that Anne is nowhere near as popular as her sisters and their books and blah, 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 right? Really, really interesting. This is my favorite of the sisters' books for a number of reasons. Really, the biggest one is this is considered as one of like the earliest like kept records of like a very feminist book. The main female character in this leaves an abusive husband and goes on to live a happy life, which was unheard of given the 1800s. Like, this book was published in 1848, 576 pages, 4.02 on Goodreads with 125,000 ratings for context, right? But 1846, talking about these really feminist, leaving abusive relationships, recognizing and calling out a husband for being unfaithful, for having alcohol issues, for like not treating anybody very well. Crazy, crazy concept. There was a bunch of pushback because of the topics within it, but also the style of writing. So if you're familiar, Wuthering Heights had similar pushback. In Wuthering Heights, it is written through the point of view of this guy who's like interviewing somebody. And so there's like some layers of the writing. It's not just like a straightforward storytelling. This one is even more convoluted. Because it's the main male character is writing letters to his friend, documenting letters that he had from this woman. It'll make more sense once we get into the actual story itself, but I just want to like contextualize some interesting aspects of the book, of what we're going to get into, why it was so crazy, and why people really pushed back on it quite a bit at the time. With all of that being said, we'll go ahead and get right into it. In the author's preface that she has in the second edition, she is addressing the pushback that the book initially received and the claims that it was written by a woman and kind of like the disparaging comments that it was written by a woman, as well as comparison saying that Acton, Currer, and Ellis Bell, which are the pseudonyms of her sisters, is saying that all three of those people are the same person. And so in this preface, she's straight up saying, hey, nope, it's just me. And also, all novels are or should be written for both men and women to read, and I am at a loss to conceive how a man should permit himself to write anything that would be really disgraceful to a woman, or why a woman should be censured for writing anything that would be proper and becoming for a man. And that's that feminist stuff that I'm talking about. Yes. Our book opens, and our narrator, his name is Gilbert, and he is in the middle of writing letters back and forth with who we learn to be, and it doesn't really matter if I tell you now, his brother-in-law. We're very much in the future, and he is writing letters to his brother-in-law, giving him a full account of certain circumstances connected with the most important event of my life. And so he goes on for the rest of the book to be explaining to his brother-in-law about how he fell in love, how he met his wife. That is so cute. And so in chapter 1, we get this initial description of who Gilbert is. It is October of 1827, and yes, the dates matter pretty significantly because we do some time traveling referencing throughout the book, like there's some timeline jumping. So it's October of 1827 when our book opens in chapter 1. Gilbert's father has passed away, and he lives out on a farm, and he is now like the man of the house, right? He's taking care of the property, taking care of his mother, his little sister, and his little brother. And as they're all hanging out that day and having tea, he learns that they have a new neighbor, a new widow, assumably. She's this like really pretty young woman. She has like a 5-year-old son, has just moved into one of the neighboring properties at Wildfell Hall. It's this older, kind of run down house that was, I think, like abandoned. Like it was not doing very well. But apparently they cleaned it up just enough for her to be able to move in with her son. But like I said, she's young, but she's alone, so everyone's assuming that she's a widow. And anytime that he has ran into her or seen her or like tried to engage with her, she has been so dismissive of him and like blowing him off and just having like a wicked attitude. And so homeboy immediately, he's like intrigued because he's like, well, I could have her if I wanted her. Like if I wanted to impress her, I could. You know what I mean? He loves the chase, I think, is what it is. Like it kind of messed with his ego a little bit. And now he's like, oh, I could have her if I wanted her. And we also learn a little bit about this girl that he's actively pursuing. I think she's the local priest's daughter. Her name is Eliza. She doesn't super matter to the story, other than just to note that his mother disapproves of Eliza. In chapter 2, he's out hunting and he ends up near the Wildfell property. While he's there, the little boy, the 5-year-old, his name is Arthur, walking or like trying to climb the garden wall and falls down. So he rushes over to help the little boy. In the midst of doing so, the mom, her name is Mrs. Graham, she runs over, starts freaking out at Gilbert. Like, get your hands off my son. What are you even doing? Blah, 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 blah. He's like, whoa, lady. I was just trying to help your freaking kid. What are you talking about? She says, oh, I'm sorry. I don't know. I just, whatever. Immediately gets a little flustered and apologizes, realizing that she might have overreacted just a tiny bit. He says, you thought I was going to kidnap your son, I suppose? She stroked his head with a half-embarrassed laugh and replied, I did not know he had attempted to climb the wall. I have the pleasure of addressing Mr. Markham, I believe. She added somewhat abruptly. I bowed but ventured to ask how she knew me. Your sister called here a few days ago with Mrs. Markham. Is the resemblance so strong then? I asked in some surprise and not so greatly flattered at the idea as I ought to have been. There's a likeness about the eyes and complexion, I think, she replied, somewhat dubiously surveying my face. And I think I saw you at church on Sunday. I smiled. There was something either in that smile or the recollections it awakened that was particularly displeasing for her, for she suddenly assumed that proud, chilly look that had so unspeakably roused my aversion at church, a look of repellent scorn so easily assumed and so entirely without the least distortion of a single feature that while there it seemed like the natural expression of the face and was more provoking to me because I could not think it affected. Good morning, Mr. Markham, she said, and without another word or glance she withdrew with her child into the garden, and I returned home, angry and dissatisfied. I could scarcely tell you why, and therefore I will not attempt it. Okay, right? So she, I don't know if I would necessarily call it flirting, right? But she like recognizes who he is, and something in the smile, probably just talking to a man in general or thinking that he's cute or whatever, instantly any type of like kindness that she had is gone. And again, I think this guy just likes the chase because he is instantly he's obviously frustrated by what's happening, but there's a little bit there where he's like, okay, but I kind of want her to like me though. He's like, at this point, she doesn't have a reason not to like me, and it's actually kind of driving me crazy. I kind of wish she just would like not keep trying to avoid me. Like, this is so weird. Also, is probably a man that has never been told no in his life, and so he is dealing with those feelings as well. But anyway, he is feeling a little hurt by this, and so he goes home, but he ends up running into Eliza. They flirt, he gets his ego boosted, and he ends up going home happy, and like his heart is full because he loves her so much, and that's exactly what he needed to recover from this drama with Mrs. Graham that happened. And in chapter 3, I haven't been telling you the names. Chapter 1 was called A Discovery. Chapter 2 was called An Interview. And chapter 3 is called A Controversy. And in this one, this is where it gets interesting. So 2 days after that whole incident, Mrs. Graham and Arthur come over to visit Gilbert's family. They come over for dinner, and immediately, Gilbert's mom and his family push back pretty heavily on the fact that Mrs. Graham brought Arthur. They're like, don't you have a servant to watch him? Like, why did you bring him? And she's like, it's fine. He's just like, he's my companion. He's just by my side. No one, doesn't matter. He's here with me. And so the controversy of this chapter is the way that she is raising her son. And there is a lot of pushback from Gilbert's family, because apparently Mrs. Graham is going against the norms in a lot of ways in raising her son. And it all stems from the fact that his sister, now at a hint from my mother, produced a decanter of wine with accompaniments of glasses and cake from the cupboard in the oak sideboard, and the refreshment was duly presented to the guests. They both partook of the cake, but refused the wine, in spite of their hostess's hospitable attempts to force it upon them. Arthur especially shrank from the ruby nectar as if in terror and disgust, and was ready to cry when urged to take it. So yes, they were going to give wine to a 5-year-old. We won't talk about it. But very immediately, there's pushback. She absolutely refuses to drink and goes on to tell them, "Never mind, Arthur," said his mama. "Mrs. Markham thinks it will do you good, and you are tired with your walk, but she will not oblige you to take it. I dare say you will do very well without. He detests the very sight of wine," she added, "and the smell almost makes him sick. I have been accustomed to make him swallow a little wine or weak spirits and water by way of medicine when he was sick, and in fact I have done what I could to make him hate them." Okay, so she has been slowly, if you're picking up what we're putting down here, has kind of like Pavloved response him into hating wine by giving it to him when he's already feeling like crap. And so he'll like associate alcohol with feeling really, really sick. Everybody laughed except the young widow and her son. "Well, Mrs. Graham," said my mother, wiping the tears of merriment from her bright blue eyes. "Well, you surprise me. I really gave you credit for having more sense. The poor child will be the veriest milksop that will ever be sopped. Only think of what a man you will make of him if you persist in—" "I think it's a very excellent plan," interrupted Mrs. Graham with imperturbable gravity. "By that means, I hope to save him from one degrading vice at least. I wish I could render the incentives to every other equally innoxious in his case." "By such means," I said, "you will never render him virtuous. What is it that constitutes virtue, Mrs. Graham? Is it the circumstance of being able and willing to resist temptation, or that of having no temptations to resist? Is he a strong man that overcomes great obstacles and performs surprising achievements, though by dint of great muscular exertion and at the risk of some subsequent fatigue? Or he that sits in his chair all day with nothing to do more laborious than stirring the fire and carrying his food to his mouth? If you would have your son to walk honorably through the world, you must not attempt to clear the stones from his path, but teach him to walk firmly over them. Not insist upon leading him by the hand, but let him learn to go alone." I.e., they're being, again, very critical of her choice to ruin alcohol for him at such a young age. Argument being, he should face vices and make the decisions to not partake in them. Otherwise, like, he's not being a good person of his own choice. Like, you're kind of taking away this, like, the virtue, right? The decision to be a good, quote unquote, good person, right? A quote unquote to not partake in these like problematic behaviors. Like, you're completely removing the decision from him. So like, how, you know what I mean? That's kind of what the argument is. She says, "I will lead him by the hand, Mr. Markham, till he has the strength to go alone, and I will clear as many stones from his path as I can and teach him to avoid the rest, or walk firmly over them, as you say. For when I have done my utmost in the way of clearance, there will be plenty left to exercise all of the agility, steadiness, and circumspection that he will ever have. It is all very well to talk about noble resistance and trials of virtue, but for 50 or 500 men that have yielded to temptation, show me one that has had virtue to resist. And why should I take it for granted that my son will be one of the 1,000, and not rather prepare for the worst and suppose he will like the rest of mankind, unless I take care to prevent it," right? She says, "No, I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing and protecting my son as much as I can and set him up for success. And like, don't you worry about it. I would rather prepare him for success than just hope that he turns out okay." "You are very complimentary to us all," I observed. "I know nothing about you. I speak of those I do know. And when I see the whole race of mankind, with a few rare exceptions, stumbling and blundering along the path of life, sinking into every pitfall and breaking their shins on every impediment that lies in their way, shall I not use all the means in my power to ensure him for a smoother and safer passage? This is such, I think, valid parenting arguments. This is crazy. And so it just continues to have this like whole back and forth about raising this kid. And so then they go into the whole thing of like, well, hopefully you're not going to be the one that teaches him. Like, hopefully you're not just like going to be the only one to raise him and teach him things. Because otherwise you'll raise him like a girl. Like, he'll be too soft for the world. Like, he needs to go to school and, be raised by a man, basically. Like, he needs to have some type of, masculine influence. And her argument is, no. Again, she says, I would not raise my daughter any different than I would raise my son. I would not send a poor girl into the world unarmed against her foes and ignorant of the snares that beset her path. Nor would I watch and guard her till deprived of self-respect in self-reliance, she lost the power or the will to watch and guard herself. And as for my son, if I thought he would grow up to be what you call a man of the world, one that has seen life and glories in his experience, even though he should so far profit by it as to sober down at length into a useful and respected member of society, I would rather that he died tomorrow, rather 1,000 times, which is a crazy sentence to say. That's wild. She ends up leaving this event, or this like visit that she has with them. And Gilbert is again upset because she is so combative with him and pushing back and everything. Now, this was like a super valid argument that she had with the mom and the sister, but the whole time too, he's like catching strays over here where she's like talking down to him, having an attitude, all this other stuff, and just like arguing with him directly. And he's upset because it's like, she has had this prejudice against me. She from the jump has decided that she was not going to like me. And I don't know what is going on with it. But again, he's like vexed by it is the term. He is just cannot get over this idea that she hates him so much. And he does not understand why. And in chapter 4, the Markhams, so like Gilbert's family, host a party and Mrs. Graham does not attend it. But instead, Eliza does, and they flirt a whole bunch. And then there's this guy named Frederick Lawrence who comes. He's just another guy. He's pretty chill. There's nothing really too crazy about him. Gilbert doesn't really think too much of him, other than the fact that when all of the other party guests start to talk badly about Mrs. Graham, about her aversion to alcohol, about the way that she's raising her son, all of this other stuff, Mr. Lawrence pushes back. And he's like, hey, I think she's fine. Like, what she's doing is good. Like, pretty much y'all need to knock it off. Like, I don't want to hear that. And the party ends. He kisses Gilbert kisses Eliza. And when the mom catches them kissing, she is pissed because she does not like Eliza. She says she is as artful as a little hussy as anybody need wish to see. That's such a funny insult to me. Just the mom does not freaking like this woman whatsoever, though. She's like, you need to find somebody else. No, stop it. And then in chapter 5, Gilbert and his sister go and visit Mrs. Graham. They go to Wildfell Hall, and they find out that Mrs. Graham is an artist. She paints, and she has these beautiful paintings that Gilbert is like flipping through as she's showing them her studio. And he ends up finding a photo painted of Wildfell Hall, but it has a different name and it has different initials on the bottom of it. Mrs. Graham admits that she wants to conceal her place of residence to certain acquaintances. She doesn't want certain people to know where she is. And so in her paintings and stuff, she obscures some details, right? And she sells these paintings to make money. Like, she sells them to somebody out in London, and that's how she's like funding her life, which is like really, really cool. In the middle of them talking about her paintings and talking about just things in general with her, suddenly she like makes a run for it. She's like, oh, pardon me, I have to go. He's like, him and his sister are like, what in the heck is happening? He looks out the window and he sees the end of like a guy's coat. Like some guy had walked up to the property and he just can't see who it is anymore. And apparently that's who Mrs. Graham had to go and deal with. And so he and his sister are still in the room hanging out, and they're looking through the paintings and just looking at everything in her studio. And there's one picture that is leaned up against the wall, like facing the wall. And so he turns it around and looks at it. I had not had the portrait in my hands but for 2 minutes before the artist returned. It was the portrait of a gentleman in the full prime of youthful manhood, handsome enough and not badly executed, but if done by the same hand as the others, it was evidently some years before, for there was far more careful minuteness of detail and less of the freshness of coloring and freedom of handling that delighted and surprised me in them. Nevertheless, I surveyed it with considerable interest. There was a certain individuality in the features and expression that stamped it at once a successful likeness. The bright blue eyes regarded the spectator with a kind of lurking drollery that you almost expected to see them wink. The lips, a little too voluptuously full, seemed ready to break into a smile. The warmly tinted cheeks were embellished with a luxuriant growth of reddish whiskers, while the brightest chestnut hair, clustering in abundant wavy curls, trespassed too much upon the forehead. And it seemed too intimate that the owner thereof was prouder of his beauty than his intellect, as perhaps he had a reason to be, and yet he looked no fool. So she comes in the room. "Oh, only someone to come about the pictures," she said, in apology for her abrupt departure. "I told him to wait." "I fear will be considered an act of impertinence," I said, "to presume to look at a picture that the artist has turned toward the wall, but may I ask—" "It is an act of impertinence, of very great impertinence, sir, and therefore I beg you will ask nothing of it, for your curiosity will not be gratified," she replied, attempting to cover the tartness of her rebuke with a smile, but I could see by her flushed cheek and kindling eye that she was seriously annoyed. "I was only going to ask if you had painted it yourself," I said, sulkily resigning the picture into her hands, for without a grain of ceremony she took it from me and, quickly restoring it to the dark corner with its face to the wall, placed the other against it as before and turned to me and laughed. But I was in no humor for jesting. I carelessly turned to the window and stood looking out upon the desolate garden, leaving her to talk to Rose for a minute or two, and then telling my sister it was time to go. Shook hands with the little gentleman, coolly bowed to the lady, and moved towards the door. But having bid adieu to Rose, Mrs. Graham presented her hand to me, saying with a soft voice and by no means a disagreeable smile, "Let not the sun go down upon your wrath, Mr. Markham. I'm sorry I offended you by my abruptness. When a lady consents to apologize, there is no keeping one's anger, of course. So we parted good friends for once, and this time I squeezed her hand with a cordial, not a spiteful pressure." Okay, so she said, "No, in fact, actually, you cannot ask me about that photo whatsoever." And he got a little in his feels about being told no. Again, this man has just never been told no once in his life. So he pouted until they left. And then finally she apologized. And then he's like, "Okay, cool. I guess we're friends." He says, "Okay, cool. This is actually the nicest that you've ever been. And I feel like I know you better now. Like I saw this side of you, and maybe you're not this like raging, rude person that I thought that you were." And in chapter 6, called Progression, over the next 4 months, Gilbert and Mrs. Graham run into each other all the time when she's going out for walks, and they develop a friendship, and he gets closer and closer to her son, Arthur. And it is very, very cute. And Gilbert is reflecting on like, okay, I'm not going to fall in love with her. I'm not going to go falling in love with her. But I do need to stop this whole thing with Eliza. Like, it's not, her and I are not going to work out. Like, I need to end things. "Okay, buddy, you're already in love. It's fine, though." And so he comes to the conclusion of like, okay, well, you know what? I actually do need to end things with Eliza because my mom does disagree with the whole relationship. And then he just happens to start going to Wildfell Hall almost every single day, making a pit stop to talk to Mrs. Graham. And on the one particular day, he runs into her when she's down at the brook and she's drawing. He asks if she's lonely, and she's like, sometimes on like, these like cold winter nights, but for the most part, no. I'm really happy just for the peace and quiet. Between that, he's building this relationship with Arthur. Everything is going really, really well. And on one of the times on his way back from a visit with her, he runs into Mr. Lawrence on the path. Like Mr. Lawrence is going, I'm assuming, to Wildfell Hall to visit her, and he's on his way back from visiting her. They make a pit stop and chit chat for a little bit because they haven't ran into each other for quite a while. Mr. Lawrence is asking if they're becoming friends or if he has changed his mind about his opinion of her based off of the stuff at the party. From like chapter 3 when everybody was talking crap. He's like, "Oh, so like, do you like her now? Are you guys friends now?" Gilbert says, "Are you in love with her? Why do you care? Like, why are you grilling me about my relationship with Mrs. Graham?" Lawrence says, "Me? In love with her? Why would you even think that?" A little bit of a pissing contest between these two. And Mr. Lawrence is like, No, and I'm not jealous of your relationship with Mrs. Graham. I'm just saying I thought you were going to marry Eliza. He says, no, I'm not marrying Eliza and I'm not marrying Mrs. Graham. And Lawrence says, then you should leave them both alone. And Gilbert says, well, Lawrence, then you should leave this other woman alone that you're talking to, unless you're going to marry her. And they just have this, like, a little bit of a face-off in the middle of this road of, like, I don't know, they just a face-off in the middle of the road. Kind of weird. Goes home that night, a little bit frustrated, and ends up having some more time with his mom and his sister. And his sister ends up complaining about having to do everything to accommodate Gilbert. Like, the sister's argument is like, Mom, you and I have to do everything, or I have to pretty much, like, we have to clean and cook and, like, change all of our plans and do everything to do anything that Gilbert wants. Like, this is BS. And the mom says, it is what it is. It's what you do when you run a household, when you have a husband, when you love somebody. Get used to it. Gilbert says, it will do me no good, mother. I was not sent into the world merely to exercise the good capacities and good feelings of others, was I? But to exert my own towards them. And when I marry, I shall expect to find more pleasure in making my wife happy and comfortable than in being made so by her. I would rather give than receive. And the mom says, oh, that's all nonsense, my dear. It's mere boys' talk that. You'll soon tire of petting and humoring your wife, be she ever so charming, and then comes the trial. Well, then we must bear one another's burdens. Then you must fall each other into your proper place. You'll do your business, and she, if she's worthy of you, will do hers. But it's your business to please yourself and hers to please you. I'm sure your poor dear father was as good as a husband as ever lived, and after the first 6 months or so were over, I should as soon have expected him to fly as to put himself out of his way to pleasure me. He always said I was a good wife and did my duty, and he always did his. Bless him. He was steady and punctual, seldom found fault without a reason, and always did justice to my good dinners, and hardly ever spoiled my cookery by delay. And that's as much as any woman can expect of any man. Gilbert is ending this letter to his friend saying, is it so, Halford? That's his friend's name. Is that the extent of your domestic virtues? And does your happy wife exact no more? And this is, again, I think like feminist writing, and also probably one of the indicators that this was not written by a man. What Gilbert is saying is, yeah, my wife and I are a team. I'm going to do what I can to make her happy. She should do what she can to make me happy. Like, we're here for each other. And the mom says, nope, the wife will do everything and settle and do anything she can to make you happy, and that's all that matters. Okay. It's interesting to lay out the expectations of the relationships and these marriages and whatnot in such a way and then counter it. It's the same thing with like raising the kid. Like, so much of Gilbert's family is what I would assume to be the status quo at the time, and then combating it so blatantly with Gilbert and Mrs. Graham. It is one thing to look at it now and to be like, oh, well, this is so clearly wrong and this is so clearly right, because it was such like future forward thinking. But to kind of put yourself and to be thinking about this at the time where it was quite the opposite, where the things that Gilbert and Mrs. Graham are saying are absolute nonsense to these people. In chapter 7, a couple of days later, and pretty much it's called The Excursion, and everybody goes on a little trip to the seaside. Eliza, Gilbert, his sister, Mrs. Graham, Arthur, so many of them, they go down to the ocean. And it's really just kind of like a little slice of life, as they have in the modern day ones, where it's just an outing and relationship building stuff going on. And the important thing really to note here is Gilbert's realization of how much more he prefers talking to Mrs. Graham than he does Eliza, and just like further getting the confirmation that it's how much he prefers her. In chapter 8, 6 weeks later, we're in June of 1828. Gilbert gets a book delivered, and the kid who and the person who gives him the book is like, oh, I know who this gift is for. This must be for Miss Eliza. Gilbert says, you would be wrong. The gift is actually for Mrs. Graham. And so he cuts out of work early, has the other guys kind of take care of the farm stuff, and he goes over to her house to give her this book. It is Merriman by Sir Walter Scott, in case you were curious. Don't ask me, I don't know. So he shows up to her house and she was painting, and it was another beautiful, beautiful painting. And he gives it to her, saying, you were wishing to see Merriman, Mrs. Graham, and here it is for you, if you will be so kind as to take it. A momentary blush suffused her face, perhaps a blush of sympathetic shame for such an awkward style of presentation. She gravely examined the volume on both sides and then slightly turned over the leaves, knitting her brows for a while and while seriously looking, then closed the book and turning it to me, quietly asked the price of it. I felt the hot blood rush to my face. I'm sorry to offend you, Mr. Markham, but unless I pay for the book, I cannot take it. Why can you not? Because, she paused and looked at the carpet. Why can you not? I repeated with a degree of irascibility that aroused her to lift her eyes and look me steadily in the face. That means anger, by the way, with a degree of anger. Because I don't like to put myself under obligations that I can never repay. I am obliged to you already for your kindness to my son, but his grateful affection and your own good feelings must reward you for that. Nonsense, I said. She turned her eyes on me again with a look of quiet, grave surprise that had the effect of a rebuke, whether intended or not. Then you won't take the book? I asked more mildly than I had yet spoken. I will gladly take it if you let me pay for it. I told her the exact price and the cost of the carriage, besides, in as calm as a tone as I could command for in fact I was ready to weep with disappointment and vexation. She produced her purse and coolly counted the money, and hesitated to put it into my hand. Attentively regarding me in a tone of soothing softness, she observed, You think yourself insulted, Mr. Markham. I wish I could make you understand that I do understand you perfectly, I said. You think that if you were to accept a trifle from me now, I should presume upon it hereafter, but you are mistaken. If you only oblige me by taking it, believe me, I shall build no hopes upon it, and consider this no precedent for future favors. And it is nonsense to talk about putting yourself under obligations to me when you must know that in such case of the obligation is entirely on my side, the favor on yours. Well then, I'll take you at your word, she answered with the most angelic smile, returning the odious money to her purse. But remember, I will remember what I have said, but do not you punish my presumption by withdrawing your friendship entirely from me, or expect me to atone for it by being more distant than before, I said, extending my hand to take leave, for I was too much excited to remain. Well then, let us be as we were, she replied, frankly placing her hand in mine, and while I held it there, I had so much difficulty to refrain from pressing it to my lips, but that would be suicidal madness, and I had been bold enough already, and this premature offering had well nigh given the death blow to my hope. It was with an agitated, burning heart and brain that I hurried homewards, regardless of that scorching noonday sun, forgetful of everything but her I had just left, regretting nothing but her impenetrability and my own precipitancy and want of tact, fearing nothing but her hateful resolution and my inability to overcome it, hoping nothing but halt. I will not bore you with my conflicting hopes and fears, my serious cogitations and resolves. That was so cute. So he tries to give her this book. She says, I literally have to pay you for this. I don't want to owe you anything. He says, no, actually, if you take it and don't pay me, that would be doing me a favor. I don't want your money at all. Yeah, it would actually be a gift to me if you take this gift, and then we would be even. And she says, okay, I guess, but I don't owe you anything. And he's like, I know. All you have to owe me is not treating me any different after you take this. I want to continue being friends. And she says, okay. And while he is happy that at least they'll continue being friends, he also in that moment understands that there is no hope for a relationship with them. She made that abundantly clear that there is no hope for anything romantic with her, which is also so sad. But he is so persistent in a tactful way. He even kind of acknowledged it here of wanting to have tact with her and not overstep boundaries and stuff, and trying to respect the distance that she has between them, but also being persistent in the fact that he does find her fascinating and interesting, and he wants to break her walls down and figure out what the heck is going on with her and why she has this disdain and these walls in the first place. It is so cute. It's so genuinely a completely different experience of the main male character compared to the other books by the Brontes, by Anne's sisters, which I think is the other reason why I enjoyed this book so much, because this guy doesn't seem like a douchebag. I love, just in general, I love the stories where the guy falls first. This is 100% one of those stories where he is instantly just obsessed, like head over heels for this woman and doing everything he can to even have her look at him, like give him the time of freaking day, just begging for attention. And it is so wholesome in that regard. And then in chapter 9, this one is called A Snake in the Grass. It's another party. And at this one, Eliza is being a little persnickety. I don't know why that was the word that came to my mind. She's being a little sassy. Everyone's kind of picking up what's happening, that Gilbert is really, really interested in Mrs. Graham, and Eliza's a little bit jealous. And so she's like, hey, what do you know about Mrs. Graham's husband? Like, don't you think it's a little weird? Doesn't Mr. Lawrence look a lot like Arthur? Isn't that strange? I wonder if that's the kid's real father. He ends up going outside, trying to get some air after coming to this realization of how much Arthur and Lawrence look alike. And just in general, he's just kind of tired of the party. And while he's out there, he runs into none other than Mrs. Graham and Arthur, who also stepped out of the party to get a little bit of air. And she asks him if he's okay. She says, I feared you were unwell, she said with a look of real concern. I was rather, but it's over now. Do sit here a little and rest, and tell me how you like this arbor, said I. Lifting Arthur by the shoulders, I planted him in the middle of the seat by way of securing his mamma, who, acknowledging it to be a tempting place of refuge, threw herself back in one corner while I took possession of the other. Which, it's like a little, I don't even know if it's a seated area. It's just this little clearing patch thing in this garden where they're all just kind of sitting together and hanging out. I don't think it's on like an actual bench or something, but it might be. Who freaking knows, man? I don't know. Anyway, but it's the three of them and they're sitting together hanging out. She's like, oh, sorry, Mr. Markham. Like, oh, he didn't mean to run into you. And he's like, oh, no, it's okay. Like, come on, come hang out with me anyway. What's going on? Like, why are you guys out here? And she says, oh, I was wearied to death with small talk. Nothing wears me out like that. I cannot imagine how they can go on and on as they do. I could not help smiling at the serious depth of her wonderment. Is it that they think it is a duty to be continually talking, pursued she, and so never pause to think, but fill up with aimless trifles and vain repetitions when subjects of real interest fail to present themselves, or do they really take a pleasure in such discourse? Very likely they do, said I. Their shallow minds can hold no great ideas, and their light heads are carried away by trivial ideas that would not move a better furnished skull, and their only alternative to such discourse is to plunge over their head and ears into the slough of scandal, which is their chief delight. Not all of them, surely, cried the lady, astonished at the bitterness of my remark. No, certainly, I exonerate my sister from such degraded tastes, and my mother too, if you included her in your aversions. I meant no aversions against anyone, and certainly intended no disrespectful allusions to your mother. I have known some sensible persons great adepts in that style of conversation when circumstances impelled them to it, but it is a gift I cannot boast to the possession of. I kept up my attention on this occasion as long as I could, but when my powers were exhausted, I stole away to seek a few minutes' repose in this quiet walk. I hate talking where there is no exchange of ideas or sentiments, and no good given or received. Well, said I, if ever I trouble you with my loquacity, tell me so at once, and I promise not to be offended, for I possesses the faculty of enjoying company of of my friends, as well as in the silence of conversation. I don't quite believe you, but if it were so, you would exactly suit me for a companion. I am all you wish, then, in other respects? No, I don't mean that. How beautiful those little clusters of foliage look, where the sun can come through behind them, she said on purpose to change the subject. So they both hate small talk, and he says, well, if you ever just want to talk about other things or talk in general, I love talking to people that I love. That's what he wanted to say. He wanted to say that he loved her, but instead he says that I'm friends with. And dude, that little exchange at the very end, if it were quite so that he likes to talk about serious things and that he's so open, like an open ear for her, you would exactly suit me for a companion. I am all you wish then in other respects. It was late in the evening before I joined the company. I found Mrs. Graham already equipped for departure and taking leave of the rest, who were now returned to the house. I offered, nay, begged to accompany her home. Mr. Lawrence was standing by at the time, conversing with someone else. He did not look at us, but on hearing my earnest request, he paused in the middle of a sentence to listen for her reply, and went on with a look of quiet satisfaction the moment he found it to be a denial. A denial it was. Decided, though not unkind. She could not be persuaded to think that there was danger for herself or her child in traversing those lonely lanes and fields without attendance. It was daylight still, and she would meet no one, or if she did, the people were quiet and harmless, she was well assured. In fact, she would not hear of anyone's putting himself out of the way to accompany her. When she was gone, the rest was all a blank or worse. Lawrence attempted to draw me onto conversation, but I snubbed him and went to another part of the room. Shortly after the party broke up, and he himself took leave. When he came to me, I was blind to his extended hand, and deaf to his good night till he repeated it a second time, and then, to get rid of him, I muttered an inarticulate reply accompanied by a sulky nod. Okay, right? Hold on, we'll get there. What is the matter, Markham? Whispered he. I replied by a wrathful and contemptuous stare. Are you angry because Mrs. Graham would not let you go home with her? He asked with a faint smile that nearly exasperated me beyond control. But swallowing down all fiercer answers, I merely demanded, what business is it of yours? Why, none, he replied with a provoking quietness. Only... And he raised his eyes to my face and spoke with unusual solemnity. Only, let me tell you, Markham, that if you have any designs in that quarter, they will certainly fail, and it grieves me to see you cherishing false hopes, and wasting your strength in useless efforts for hypocrite, I exclaimed, and he held his breath and looked very blank, turned white about the gills, and went away without another word. I had wounded him to the quick, and I was glad of it. He, again, so badly, this man is just throwing himself at Mrs. Just trying to love her and not scare her away in doing so. And Mr. Lawrence, has always kept an eye on them at a distance. And there's some weird tension there that Gilbert is feeling and a little bitter about it. And so at the end of the party, when he's blowing Lawrence off when he tries to leave, Lawrence says, "Hey, buddy boy, I saw how hard you were trying to take her home. How about you not pout about it? And also, if you think that you're going to make any progress in being in a relationship with her, you need to lay off." Okay. They are not friends right now, right? So talk about some freaking drama between these two over Mrs. Graham. At the very, very end of the night, with everybody else gone, it's just Gilbert, his mom, and his sister talking. And he finds out about all of the crazy rumors and crap talking that there was about Mrs. Graham, mostly about Lawrence and how, he's actually the father of her child, and how he sneaks over to Wildfell Hall, and they are having an affair, right? Is the whole idea here, that she's this improper woman. And the mom and the sister are don't worry, we don't believe it at all. But don't you think there's some foundation to it? Why would all these people be saying this? There's got to be some truth to it. And he's no, there's not. And he's just getting very, very frustrated by just in general people gossiping, but also his mom and his sister. And so in this letter to his friend, he's recounting all of this, and he says, "I believe it was on that very evening that I ventured on another invasion of Wildfell Hall. From the time of our party, which was upwards of a week ago, I had been making daily efforts to meet its mistress in her walks, and always disappointed. She must have managed to do so on purpose. At length, I concluded that the separation could be endured no longer. By this time, you'll see I was pretty far gone. In love." And taking from the bookcase an old volume that I thought she might be interested in, though from its unsightly and somewhat dilapidated condition I had not yet ventured to offer it for perusal. I hastened away, but not without sundry misgivings as to how she would receive me, or how I could summon courage to present myself with so slight an excuse, but perhaps I might see her in the field or the garden, and then there would be no great difficulty. It was the formal knocking at the door, with the prospect of being gravely ushered in by Rachel, the servant, to the presence of a surprised, uncordial mistress that so greatly disturbed me. My wish, however, was not gratified. Mrs. Graham herself was not to be seen, but there was Arthur, playing with his frolicsome little dog in the garden. I looked over the gate and called him to me. He wanted me to come in, but I told him I could not without his mother's leave. "I'll go and ask her," said the child. No, Arthur, you mustn't do that, but if she's not engaged, just ask her to come here a minute. Tell her that I want to speak with her." So he ran to perform my bidding and quickly returned with his mother. How lovely she looked with her dark ringlets streaming in the summer breeze, her fair cheek slightly flushed, and her countenance radiant with smiles. Dear Arthur, what did I not owe you for this and every other happy meeting? Through him, I was at once delivered from all formality and terror and constraint. In love affairs, there is no mediator like a merry, simple-hearted child, ever ready to cement divided hearts, to span the unfriendly gulf of custom, to melt the ice of cold reserve, and overthrow the separating walls of dread, formality, and pride. Ugh. I just love the way he talks about her. I love this book. This is like, to me, the most romantic one. Like his like pursuit of her is so, the longing, dude. I love longing. I love unabashed longing. Well, Mr. Markham, what is it? I want you to look at this book, and if you please to take it and peruse it at your leisure. I make no apology for calling you out on such a lovely evening, though it be for a matter of no greater importance. Tell him to come in, said Arthur. Would you like to come in? Asked the lady. Yes, I should like to see your improvements in the gardens, and how your sister's roots have prospered in my charge. The roses. So his sister gave her some flowers, and so he's like, oh yeah, like, show me the garden. Let's see how the garden's doing, how these new plants are. So she goes in there, and she cuts one of the flowers, and he's like, hey, and she's like, hey, you bring this to your sister as proof of life, pretty much. Like, you can tell her the garden's doing fine. And he says, may I not keep it for myself? No, but here's another for you. Instead of taking it quietly, I likewise took the hand that offered it and looked into her face. She let me hold it for a moment, and I saw a flash of ecstatic brilliance in her eyes, a glow of glad excitement on her face. I thought my hour of victory was come, but instantly a painful recollection seemed to flash upon her. A cloud of anguish darkened her brow, a marble paleness blanched her cheeks and lip. There seemed to be a moment of inward conflict. With a sudden effort, she withdrew her hand and retreated a step or two back. No, Mr. Markham, she said, with a kind of desperate calmness. I must tell you plainly that I cannot do this. I cannot do with this. I like your company because I am alone here, and your conversation pleases me more than that of any other person. But if you cannot be content to regard me as a friend, a plain, cold, motherly, or sisterly friend, I must beg you to leave me now and let me alone hereafter. In fact, we must be strangers for the future. I will, then, be your friend or brother or anything you wish, if you will only let me continue to see you, but tell me why I cannot be anything more. There was a perplexed and thoughtful pause. Is it in consequence of some rash vow? It is something of the kind, she answered. Some day I may tell you, but at present you had better leave, and never, Gilbert, put me in the painful necessity of repeating what I have just said to you now. She earnestly added, giving me her hand in serious kindness. How sweet, how musical my own name sounded in her mouth. I will not, I replied, but you pardon this offense? On condition that you never repeat it. And may I come to see you now and then? Perhaps, occasionally, provided you never abuse the privilege. I make no empty promises, but you shall see. The moment you do, our intimacy is at an end. That's all. And will you always call me Gilbert? It sounds more sisterly, and it will serve to remind me of our contract. She smiled, and once more bid me a go, and at length I judged it prudently to obey, and she re-entered the house, and I went down the hill. But as I went, the tramp of horses' hoofs fell on my ear and broke the stillness of the dewy evening. In looking towards the lane, I saw a solitary equestrian coming up. Inclining to dusk as it was, I knew it was him at a glance. It was Mr. Lawrence on his gray pony. I flew across the field, leaped a stone fence, and then walked down the lane to meet him. On seeing me, he suddenly drew in his little steed and seemed inclined to turn it back, but on second thought apparently judged it better to continue his course as before. He accosted me with a slight bow, and, edging closer to the wall, endeavored to pass on, but I was not so minded. Seizing his horse by the bridle, I exclaimed, Now, Lawrence, I will have this mystery explained. Tell me where you are going and what you mean to do at once and distinctly. So, before we continue this drama, beep, boop, beep, boop, beep, boop, back to where we were. Oh, so she's like, hey, they agree to be friends. She's like, hey, whatever this is, like, we can only be friends and I need you to accept that. He says, I will be anything you want me to be as long as I can keep seeing you. That's so cute. It is so cute. And so he's happy. And so then he ends up like scurrying away pretty much, runs into Lawrence and is, again, with all the drama and all the rumors and all the gossipy party people, he like needs to know what the frick is going on between Lawrence and Mrs. Graham, Helen, right? Because he does love her. Like, let's be frank with what's going on here, right? So tell me, like, whatever you're doing at once and distinctly. Will you take your hand off the bridle? He said quietly, you're hurting my pony's mouth. You and your pony What makes you so coarse and brutal, Markham? I'm quite ashamed of you. Mr. Lawrence pretty much says, nope. All Lawrence tells Mr. Markham is that he says, can I not go see my tenant on matters of business without being assaulted in this manner? And so, okay, I guess that was the context that I forgot to say earlier. So Lawrence is like, I guess, the landlord for Wildfell Hall. And so that's the pretense of like why he's going out to the property and stuff. And so I guess that's what adds to the scandal of him visiting her so much and potentially being the father. And if she, you know what I mean, is kind of being held up as this like affair partner at this house and it is his kid. And he's like, you know, you're picking up what I'm putting down, right? Like the drama here. I forgot that he was technically renting it out to her. My bad. And they have this like whole argument back and forth. And Lawrence refuses to say anything more than that. He's like, it's literally none of your business. And they just keep yelling at each other, and eventually Gilbert storms home. As we go into chapter 11, they are befriending each other, continuing. And by now, they're calling each other by their names. You must suppose about 3 weeks had passed over. Mrs. Graham and I were now established friends, or brother and sister, as we rather chose to consider ourselves. She called me Gilbert by my express desire, and I called her Helen, for I had seen that name written in her books. I seldom attempted to see her above twice a week, and I still made our meetings appear the result of an accident as often as I could, for I found it necessary to be extremely careful. And altogether I behaved with such exceeding propriety that she never had occasion to reprove me once. Yet I could not but perceive that she was at times unhappy and dissatisfied with herself or her position, and truly I myself was not quite contented with the latter. The assumption of brotherly nonchalance was very hard to sustain, and I often felt myself a most confounded hypocrite. With it all, I saw too, or rather I felt, that in spite of herself, I was not indifferent to her, as the novel heroes modestly express it. And while I thankfully enjoyed my present good fortune, I could not fail to wish and hope something better in the future. But of course, I kept such dreams entirely to myself. So they continue this whole friendship thing. He's really, really trying to be respectful of her boundaries and what she's saying, but continually everybody is just talking mad crap about this poor woman and gossiping and talking about her depravity. And even his mom is saying like, hey, sister, right? Gilbert's sister, you're not allowed to go over there. Like, you can't befriend this woman. And Gilbert, you visiting her all the time is really just like proving how, you know, like unworthy and like problematic that she is, and how just like the idea of this like dirty woman doing these like dirty things. It's super uncool. In chapter 12, when he goes to visit Helen, or Mrs. Graham again, she is telling him, she's like, yeah, I know that you've heard the gossip about me. I know you've heard all of these like negative things and you still come over here. She says, you have heard then what they say of me? I heard some detestable falsehoods, but none but fools would credit them for a moment, Helen, so don't let them trouble you. She says, I did not think Mr. Millward a fool, and he believes it all. But however, Mr. Millward is just one of the gossipy neighbors. There's a couple other families in the area that get like constantly referenced throughout this book. I haven't mentioned them because by name they don't really matter, but he's just a neighbor. He believes it all. But however little you may value the opinions of those about you, however little you may esteem them as individuals, it is not pleasant to be looked upon as a liar and a hypocrite, to be thought to practice what you abhor, to find your good intentions frustrated and your hands crippled by your supposed unworthiness, and to bring disgrace on the principles you profess. So she says, cool, I'm glad you're not affected by it, dude, but I am. He says, true, and if I, by my thoughtless and selfish disregard to appearances, have at all assisted to expose you to these evils, let me entreat you not only to pardon me, but to enable me to make reparation. Authorize me to clear your name from every imputation. Give me the right to identify your honor with my own and to defend your reputation as more precious than my life. She says, are you hero enough to unite yourself to one whom you know to be suspected and despised by all around you, and identify your interests and your honor with hers? Think, it is a serious thing. I should be proud to do it, Helen, most happy, delighted beyond expression, and if that be the obstacle to our union, it is demolished. And you shall be mine. Oh my God, I love this so much. I feel like in all of the other ones, the books that we've read so far in these classics, these men have been, there's been like ghostly elements to it and like really manipulative bad men, just kind of in general, between Wuthering Heights and Jane Eyre, where they were just doing some crazy shady crap. This poor guy, he's just so madly in love. And I know I've said that so many times, but this is so cute. So, translation, because I'm going to keep reading, this is a pretty long section. The whole point of the conversation, though, is her saying, all of these people talk badly about me. He says, yeah, I know, let me defend you. Like, if that's what you're concerned about, like, let's be together and I'll defend you and, like, whatever. I'm not worried about it, and I'll do whatever I can to make sure that they don't speak ill of you. Starting from my seat, in a frenzy of ardor, I seized her hand and would have pressed it to my lips, but she suddenly caught it away, exclaiming in the bitterness of intense affliction, no, it is not all. What is it then? You promised I should know sometime, and you shall know sometime, but not now. My head aches terribly, and I must have some repose. And surely I have had misery enough today, but it could not harm you to tell it. It would ease your mind, and I should then know how to comfort you. If you knew all, you too would blame me, perhaps even more than I deserve, though I have cruelly wronged you. You, Helen? Impossible. Yes, not willingly, for I did not know the strength and depth of your attachment. I thought, at least, I endeavored to think of your regard of me as cold and fraternal as you professed it to be. Or as yours? Or as mine ought to have been, of such a light and selfish, superficial nature that, there, you indeed wronged me. I know I did, and sometimes I suspected it then, but I thought upon the whole there could be no great harm in leaving your fancies and your hopes to dream themselves to nothing or flutter away to some more fitting object, while your friendly sympathies remained with me. But if I had known the depth of your regard, the generous, disinterested affection you seem to feel, Helen, that you do feel, I would have acted differently. How? You could not have given me less encouragement or treated me with greater severity than you did. And if you think you have wronged me by giving me your friendship and occasionally admitting me to the enjoyment of your company and conversation when all hopes of closer intimacy were in vain, as indeed you always gave me to understand, if you think you have wronged me by this, you are mistaken, for such favors in themselves alone are not only delightful to my heart, but purifying, exalting, ennobling to my soul, and I would rather have your friendship than the love of any other woman in the world. Oh my God. She, again, realizing the severity of his feelings, she's like, dude, I'm so sorry. I really thought that you were actually just trying to be my friend. I led you on, my bad. And he's like, dude, you literally did not. You have been so adamant and vocal that there's nothing between us. I just would rather have your friendship than any other woman in the world. Oh my God. That is so cute. And then he goes on to talk about, like, do you love me? Admit it. Blah, 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 blah. I know there's something here. She just says, please just leave. Just go. Just go. And she starts to, like, cry her eyes out. He goes, but he wishes to catch one more glimpse of her before he went. So he turns back. I had not thus looked and wished and wondered long before I vaulted over the barrier, unable to resist the temptation of taking one glance through the window, just to see if she were more composed than when we parted. And if I found her still in deep distress, perhaps I might venture an attempt to comfort, to utter one of the many things I should have said before, instead of aggravating her sufferings by my stupid impetuosity. I looked. Her chair was vacant, so was the room. But at that moment, someone opened the outer door, and a voice, her voice, said, "Come out, I want to see the moon and breathe the evening air. They will do me good, if anything will." So he looks around the corner, assuming that it's going to be Helen or Mrs. Graham with Rachel. It's not. She's with Mr. Lawrence, and he's putting his arm around her and whispering something in her ear that Gilbert cannot hear. "You should not let it worry you so much, Helen," said he. "I will be more cautious in the future, and in time—" I did not hear the rest of the sentence, for he walked close beside her and spoke so gently that I could not catch the words, my heart splitting with hatred, but I listened intently for her reply. I heard it plainly enough. "But I must leave this place, Frederick. I never can be happy here, nor anywhere else indeed." "But I cannot rest here." "But where could you find a better place, so secluded, so near me, if you think anything of that?" "Yes," she interrupted. "It is all I could wish, if they could only have left me alone. But wherever you go, Helen, there will be the same sources of annoyance. I cannot consent to lose you. I must go with you or come to you. There are meddling fools elsewhere as well as here." And so Gilbert gets pissed, realizing that maybe there was actually truth to the gossip. Maybe he did have it all wrong, and he has just been, misled and betrayed by Helen, and maybe this whole situation is actually what everyone else is saying that it is. So he storms home super, super pissed and just goes to his room and just paces around all night. And in chapter 13, he is trying to tamp down all of these bad feelings and just get back to work and focus on his job, and is actively like running away from Helen and Arthur whenever he sees them like walking down the road or anything, or like sees them coming in any type of way. Even when Arthur is like yelling out to him, trying to get his attention, trying to talk and stuff, Gilbert just leaves the situation and is completely avoiding them. And then in chapter 14, he's just riding his horse down the road, running errands or whatever, and Mr. Lawrence rides up next to him on his horse and starts to talk to him, just having a totally normal conversation. Mr. Lawrence wasn't aware that Gilbert heard all of this conversation between him and Helen, so as far as he's concerned, there is no issue. But internally, Gilbert is thinking, had he heard of my disappointment, and was he come to witness the result and triumph in my despair? This MFer is rubbing it in my face that he has the girl of my dreams. So Gilbert acts out, and with his riding whip thing, like for his horses, freaking hits Lawrence in the head. Lawrence falls off of his horse and like collapses onto the ground, and Gilbert just keeps riding away. Oh my God. Eventually he starts to feel guilty because he's like, okay, maybe I killed the man, because that actually was kind of a lot of blood and it looked really painful. And so he turns back to check on Lawrence, and he and his horse are off to the side of the road. He is bleeding profusely from his head, and he's like, hey man, my bad, like let me help you get up and stuff. Mr. Lawrence is like, F off, dude. Like, for real, just go away. You're being absolutely insane right now. And so he gets his horse for him, like gets it so it's closer because it was like off in the field or something, and then gives him his handkerchief since Mr. Lawrence's was all bloodied up, obviously. And then Gilbert just rides home, still angry about everything. And when he gets home, bad news flies fast, for it was hardly 4 o'clock when I got home. But my mother gravely accosted me with, oh, Gilbert, such an accident. Your sister had been shopping in the village when she heard that Mr. Lawrence had been thrown from his horse and brought home dying. This shocked me a trifle, as you may suppose, but I was comforted to hear that he had frightfully fractured his skull and broken a leg, for assured of the falsehood of this, I trusted the rest of the story was equally exaggerated. And when I heard my mother and sister so feelingly deploring his condition, I had considerable difficulty in preventing myself from telling them the real extent of the injuries as far as I knew them. The mother and the sister are like, hey, Mr. Lawrence was your friend, and if he's dying, like, you really need to go and check on him. Gilbert is like, that man is not my friend, for one, and for two, I'm not doing that. You can send my brother. So the brother goes the next day, checks on him, Lawrence is okay, and it's apparent that he is kind of fabricating the story, and Lawrence is not going to sell him out and say that he attacked him. It was evident then that for Mrs. Graham's sake, it was not his intention to criminate me. I.e., Mr. Lawrence knows that Mrs. Graham cares about Gilbert, so he's not going to rat him out and tell everybody what actually happened. And in chapter 15, the title of this one is An Encounter and Its Consequences. So Gilbert is working. He's out on a hill when Arthur and Helen approach him. And she says, I know that you're avoiding me. I don't ask the reason of this change, Gilbert, said she with bitter calmness. I know it too well. But though I could not see myself suspected and condemned by everyone else and bear it with calmness, I cannot endure it from you. Why would you not come to hear my explanation on the day I appointed to give it? Because I happened, in the interim, to learn of all you would have told me and a trifle more, I imagine. Impossible, for what I would have told you all, she cried passionately. But I won't now, for I see you are not worthy of it. Her pale lips quivered with agitation. Why not, may I ask? She repelled my mocking smile with a glance of scornful indignation. Because you never understood me, or you would not soon have listened to my traducers. My confidence would be misplaced in you, and you are not the man that I thought you. Go, I won't care what you think of me. She turned away, and I went, for I thought it would torment her as much as anything, and I believe I was right. For looking back a minute after, I saw her turn half round, as if hoping or expecting to find me still beside her, and then she stood still, a cast one look behind. It was a look less expressive of anger than of bitter anguish and despair, but I immediately assumed an aspect of indifference and affected to be gazing carelessly around me. And I suppose she went on, for after lingering a while to see if she would come back or call, I ventured one more glance and saw her a good way off, moving rapidly up the field with little Arthur running by her side and apparently talking as he went, but she kept her face averted from him, as if to hide some uncontrollable emotion, and I returned to my business. But I soon began to regret my precipitancy in leaving her so soon. It was evident she loved me. Probably she was tired of Mr. Lawrence and wished to exchange him for me. And if I had loved and reverenced her less to begin with, the preference might have gratified and amused me. But now the contrast between her outward seeming and her inward mind, as I supposed, between my former and present opinion of her, was so harrowing, so distressing to my feelings that it swallowed up every lighter consideration. But still, I was curious to know what sort of explanation she would have given me, or give now if I pressed her for it, how much she would confess, and how she would endeavor to excuse herself. I longed to know what to despise and what to admire in her, how much to pity and how much to hate, and what was more, I would know. I would see her once more and fairly satisfy myself in what light to regard her before we parted. Lost to me she was forever, of course, but still I could not bear to think that we had parted for the last time with so much unkindness and misery on both of our sides. That last look of hers had sunk into my heart. I could not forget it, but what a fool I was. Had she not deceived me, injured me, blighted my happiness for life? Well, I'll see her, however, was my concluding resolve, but not today. Today and tonight she may think upon her sins, and as miserable as she will, tomorrow I will see her once again and know something more about her. The interview may be serviceable to her, or it may not. At any rate, it will give me a breath of excitement to the life she had doomed to stagnation, and may calm with certainty some agitating thoughts. He says, we're leaving off on a really, really bad note, and I don't want that, even though essentially she's dead to me and there won't be a future with us. I at least want to close this chapter of our lives with some type of, conclusion that isn't just us ending on bad terms, right? So he's going to go and visit her the next day to try and get some answers and figure out what she wants to admit to him, or what her side of the story is. And so he does. He goes over to Wildfell Hall the next day, goes and speaks with her. They have a whole back and forth, and she's like, I don't know why you would believe all of these lies. He says, I didn't. I saw it with my own eyes. I saw you and Mr. Lawrence. I saw you talking. She says, how much of our conversation did you hear? I heard quite enough, Helen, and it was well for me that I did hear it, for nothing less could have cured my infatuation. I always said and thought that I would never believe a word against you unless I heard it from your own lips. All the hints and affirmations of others I treated as malignant, baseless slanders. Your own self-accusations I believed to be overstrained, and all that seemed unaccountable in your position. I trusted that you could account for it if you chose. You should have come to me after all, she said, and heard what I had to say in my own justification. It was ungenerous and wrong to withdraw yourself so secretly and suddenly, immediately after such ardent protestations of attachment, without ever assigning a reason for the change. You should have told me all, no matter how bitterly. It would have been better than this silence. To what end should I have done so? You could not have enlightened me further on a subject which alone concerned me, nor could you have made me discredit the evidence of my senses. I desired our intimacy to be discontinued at once, as you yourself had acknowledged would probably be the case if I knew all. But I did not wish to upbraid you, though, as you have also acknowledged, you had deeply wronged me. Yes, you have done me an injury you can never repair, or any other either, but you have blighted the freshness and promise of youth and made my life wilderness. I might live 100 years, but I could never recover from the effects of this withering blow and never forget it. Hereafter, you smile, Mrs. Graham, and said I, suddenly stopping short, checked in my passionate declaration of unutterable feelings to behold her actually smiling at the picture of the ruin that she had wrought. Did I? Replied she, looking seriously up. I was not aware of it. If I did, I was not for pleasure at the thoughts of the harm I had done to you. Heaven knows I have had torment enough at the bare possibility of that. It was for joy to find that you had some depth of soul and feeling after all, and to hope that I had not been utterly mistaken in your worth. But smiles and tears are so alike with me, they are neither of them confined to any particular feelings. I often cry when I am happy and smile when I am sad. Okay, I love that just in general. Smiles and tears are so alike with me. They are neither of them confined to any particular feelings. I often cry when I am happy and smile when I am sad. I love that sentence so much. I'm going to continue reading this section, so just to, like, again, ensure that we're all on the same page here. She is saying how depressed that she was for him to make these declarations of love that night before, and then for him to go totally silent after this whole Lawrence thing and not tell her what happened. And he's like, why would I tell you what happened? It's not like you could change anything that happened. It's not like you could justify your actions or make anything better. Like, everybody here is just going to be heartbroken out of this deal. What was the point of me even confronting you about anything? It was just easy to, you know, like let it lie. And then she's smiling as he's making these explanations, because we'll talk about it a little bit later, but this level of passion and expression of emotion and feeling is something that she has always wanted so badly. And he's showing her this. He's expressing this deep passion, okay? And like I said, we'll revisit it later, but it's a very big deal. She looked at me again and seemed to expect a reply, but I continued silent. Would you be very glad, resumed she, to find out that you were mistaken in your conclusions? How can you ask it, Helen? I don't say that I can clear myself altogether, she said, speaking low and fast while her heart beat visibly and her bosom heaved with excitement. But would you be glad to discover that I was better than you think me? Anything that could, in the least degree, tend to restore my former opinion of you, to excuse the regard I still feel for you, and alleviate the pangs of unutterable regret that accompany it, would be only too gladly, too eagerly received. Her cheeks burned and her whole frame trembled, now with the excess of agitation. She did not speak, but flew to her desk, snatching thence what seemed a thick album or manuscript volume, hastily tore away a few leaves from the end and thrust it into my hand, saying, "You needn't read it all, but take it home with you," and hurried from the room. But when I had left the house and was proceeding down the walk, she opened the window and called me back. It was only to say, "Bring it back when you have read it, and don't breathe a word of what it tells you to any other living being. I trust to your honor." She has given him her diary entries, like a stack of her diary entries starting from 1821. Keep in mind, in this letter to his friend, he's recounting his life starting from 1827. So these are letters from 6 years ago of, like, the whole time warpy weirdness, right? And this is where I was saying that the book gets kind of interesting, and there's some, like, layers of distancing herself, Anne, right, the author, distancing herself from the narrative, where now not only is it Gilbert writing a letter to a friend, it's Gilbert writing a letter to a friend recounting entries in another person's diary. Like, we are layers deep of distancing from these ideas and what's happening and telling a story in a really, really unique way, right? Fascinating. Very, very cool. Very, very unique concepts. Freaking love all of this. So in chapter 16, we begin reading a series of entries. Like, almost the rest of the book is through the series of entries of Mrs. Graham, of Helen, talking about her life and her life and her experiences, okay? And so this part, I'll go a little bit faster maybe, because I do need to get through this. I'm taking forever. In this first diary entry, Helen is 18 years old, and she comes from a good family. She has money, and she's absolutely gorgeous, and she lives with her aunt and uncle. And she's getting a little bit of advice from her aunt, saying, "Helen," she said after thoughtful silence, "do you ever think about marriage?" "Yes, aunt, often." "And do you ever contemplate the possibility of being married yourself or engaged before the season is over?" "Sometimes, but I don't think it's likely that I ever shall." "Why so?" "Because I imagine there must be very, very few men in the world who I should like to marry, and of those few it is 10 to 1 I may never get acquainted with one, or if I should, it is 20 to 1 that he may not happen to be single or to take fancy to me." Which is also incredibly relatable. So she's talking about getting married, and her aunt is kind of encouraging this, like, unlikeliness of getting married, saying, like, you shouldn't settle, you shouldn't settle for anybody, and you need to make sure that whoever you marry has a pure heart and good intentions. "Because, my dear, beauty is that quality which, next to money, is generally the most attractive to the worst kinds of men, and therefore it is likely to entail a great deal of trouble on the professor." And so the aunt is just giving her a heads up to be careful who she falls in love with and who she ends up getting married to, because she does have money, right? And a bunch of other stuff. So they have this party, and they're trying to set her up. I believe it's with one of the uncle's friends, and he's just an older guy, and she is not feeling it. Instead, there's this cute guy, Huntington, that has caught her attention. Chapter 17, there's another dinner party where it's kind of like a courting thing where everybody's trying to kind of couple up and figure out who these beautiful young women are going to marry. So obviously we have Helen, and then we have Annabelle and Millicent. And she's friends with these two young women. They're all about the same age, kind of going after the same guys. Meaning Annabelle and Helen are both going after this Huntington dude, thinking he is so cute and charming. And Helen is getting incredibly jealous whenever he's giving attention to Annabelle. Annabelle's getting incredibly jealous when he's giving attention to Helen. It's this whole like catty rivalry thing that is kind of happening between the two of them. And he knows what he's doing. He knows what's going on. He is completely, immediately off the bat, like manipulating these two girls to pretty much be fighting over him. And the aunt, by the end of this, is like, hey, we're leaving. Like, you need to not think about that guy. Like, he really, really sucks. But if I hate the sins, I love the sinner and would do much for his salvation, even supposing your suspicions to be mainly true, which I do not and will not believe. I.e., I can fix him. Yes, he might have problems, which I don't think he even does. I think you guys are all just being dramatic, but if he does, I can fix him. Oh, girl. You can imagine how downhill this whole situation's about to go, right? Poor teenage girls, man. Even in the 1800s, getting freaking manipulated by these F-boys. And chapter 18 opens August 25th, 1821. I am now quite settled down to my usual routine of steady occupations and quiet amusements, tolerably contented and cheerful, but still looking forward to spring, with the hope of returning to town. Not for its gaieties and dissipations, but for the chance of meeting Mr. Huntington once again. For still he is always in my thoughts and in my dreams. In all my employments, whatever I do or see or hear has an ultimate reference to him. Whatever skill or knowledge I acquire is some day to be turned to his advantage or amusement. Whatever new beauties in nature or art I discover are to be depicted to meet his eye, or stored in my memory to be told to him at some future period. This, at least, is the hope that I cherish, the fancy that lights me on my lonely way. She is down bad for this man. Ends up back wherever. There's having parties. She's meeting all these men again, yet again running into Huntington. And this paper will serve instead of a confidential friend into whose ear I might pour forth the overflowings of my heart. It will not sympathize with my distresses, but then it will not laugh at them. And if I keep it close, it cannot tell again. So it is perhaps the best friend I could have for the purpose. Which I think is just a beautiful kind of introduction into writing and like purpose of writing. I really, really liked that. Not necessarily for the story, but just in general, like my love of writing, I feel like is kind of summarized very well right there. She's reflecting, and the reason that she's kind of pouring herself out onto this paper is because in the course of that particular evening, Annabelle was called upon to sing and play for the amusement of the company, and I to exhibit my drawings. And though he, Huntington, likes music, and she is an accomplished musician, I think I am right in affirming he paid more attention to my drawings than to her music. So far, so good. But hearing him pronounce sotto voce, but with peculiar emphasis concerning one of the pieces, this is better than all. I looked up, curious to see which it was, and to my horror beheld him complacently gazing at the back of the picture. It was his own face that I had sketched there and forgotten to rub out. To make matters worse, in the agony of the moment, I attempted to snatch it from his hand, but he prevented me, exclaiming, "No! By George, I'll keep it!" Placed it against his waistcoat, and buttoned his coat upon it with a delighted chuckle. So she, in all of her drawings, on the back of her paintings that she does, she kind of will sketch out new ideas, and a couple of times had sketched out photos of him because he had so like infiltrated her brain. And so he's looking at her artworks, flips one around, finds this, and kind of teases her about it. And he's like overly flattered about having this photo of him by her. And it kind of confirms her feelings for him, right? So she is incredibly embarrassed, and he continues to tease her about it, asking him to give it back to her. But the more vehemently I insisted, the more he aggravated my distress by his insulting, gleeful laugh. At length, however, he restored it to me, saying, well, since you value it so much, I'll not deprive you of it. To show him how much I valued it, I tore it in two and threw it into the fire. Oh my God, so she is so embarrassed, mortified by the situation. She ends up just throwing it in the fire. In this, pisses him off. Well, why did you burn my picture, Helen? Because I wished to destroy it. Oh, very good. If you don't value me, I must turn to somebody that will. I thought it was partly in jest, a half-playful mixture of mock resignation and pretended indifference, but immediately he resumed his place beside Annabelle, and from that hour to this, during all that evening and all the next day and the next and the next and all this morning, he has not given me one kind word or one pleasant look, never spoken to me, but from pure necessity, never glanced toward me, but with cold, unfriendly look I thought him quite incapable of assuming. Oh my goodness. So this is eating her alive, right? This attention that he so willingly gives and takes from her. But she justifies it. She says he meant no harm. It was only his joyous, playful spirit, and I, by my acrimonious resentment, so serious, so disproportioned to the offense, have wounded his feelings, so deeply offended him that I fear he will never forgive me. And all for a mere jest. She just justifies his behavior. And also says, oh, why can't I hate him? I must be infatuated, or I should scorn to regret him as I do, but I must rally the powers I have remaining and try to tear him from my heart. There goes the dinner bell, and here comes my aunt to scold me for sitting here at my desk all day instead of staying with the company. I wish the company were gone. Chapter 19 is called An Incident. After dinner that night, she sees Mr. Huntington really, really close to Annabella, who's playing the piano, and she goes to the library crying, accepting that, okay, I guess he is actually like just moved on and this is terrible. But he follows her. He follows her into this study room and says that he doesn't care about Annabella. Or Annabelle, sorry, I've been going back and forth, but Annabella. And she confesses her feelings for him, that she's in love with him, and sweeps her into his arms. And again, they're about to kiss, and the aunt storms into the room and catches them, and she's like, what the frick? Huntington says, no, I was proposing marriage. I was proposing marriage. It's not indecent. There's nothing bad happening. I do want to marry her, blah, 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 trying to cover his own butt. And the aunt gets pissed and like sends Helen off to her room. So disappointed in Helen for falling for such a crappy man. Like everybody can see how much of like a player and crappy behavior that he has, but she is just so infatuated. In chapter 20 called Persistence, we're in September of 1821, and Helen and Huntington are talking, and she says, hey, like my aunt will not approve of our marriage. And he just continues to laugh about it and play it off and says like, oh, don't worry, I'll be on my best behavior. I'll make sure that she will approve and that she'll like me. And eventually Helen just continues to reassure her aunt, like, yes, I understand your concerns. He might be vulgar. He might have these problems. He might not be going to church as often as he should and, has all of these vices, but I can fix him. I'll make him better, aunt. Like, I need to be able to be in his life so that I can make him a better man. You just have to trust that this is the case. Eventually they wear them down and the aunt approves, or the uncle, I think the uncle approves. I don't think the aunt ever really approves of Huntington, but the uncle does. And now all that's left is to pick a wedding date and then write to her father for like formal approval of the marriage. And in chapter 21 called Opinions, Millicent, we mentioned briefly before, she is the most quiet of the friend group, very just meek and like weak-willed, which sounds horrible, but that's kind of what the description is. To learning of the engagement between Huntington and Helen, she says, well, Helen, I suppose I ought to congratulate you, and I am glad to see you happy, but I did not think that you would take him, and I can't help but feeling surprised that you should like him so much. Why so? Because you are so superior to him in every way, and there's something so bold and reckless about him, so I don't know how, but I always feel a wish to get out of his way when I see him approach. So literally, all of her friends, her aunt, her friends, everybody is like, hey, honey, this is not a good idea. But love makes you blind. This is, again, one of those cases where reading something from the 1800s in 1821. So we're 200 years later, still so true and valid and happens to people all the freaking time. It is so insane. In chapter 22, October 5th, my cup of sweets is not unmingled. It is dashed with a bitterness that I cannot hide from myself. Disguise it as I will, I may try to persuade myself that the sweetness overpowers it. I may call it a pleasant aromatic flavor, but say what I will, it is still there, and I cannot but taste it. I cannot shut my eyes to Arthur's faults. Arthur is Huntington's first name. I cannot shut my eyes to Huntington's faults, and the more I love him, the more they trouble me. His very heart that I trusted so is, I fear, less warm and generous than I thought it. At least he gave me a specimen of his character today that seemed to merit a harder name than thoughtlessness. The rest of the chapter is really talking about Arthur and Lord Loberose. I'm slaughtering that man's name, but it's fine. About their friendship and them partying together, and Arthur criticizing how much that Lord Lowborough would drink and cause trouble and like fall into these vices, and Arthur, promising Helen, like, yeah, I'll never have that problem. Like, I'll always, do things in moderation and you don't have to worry about me. And when Lowborough did get like sober and stop drinking, Arthur made fun of him for being boring. And so it was one of those, the name of the chapter being traits of friendship, i.e. the trait of friendship being not a good one. Arthur kind of freaking sucks. Like, Huntington kind of freaking sucks as a friend. And the chapter ends with another diary entry from the 22nd. I have had several letters from Huntington already. They are not long, but passing and sweet, just like himself, full of ardent affection and playful, lively humor. But there is always a but in the imperfect world, and I do wish that he would sometimes be serious. I cannot get him to write or speak in real solid earnest. I don't much mind it now, but if always so, what shall I do with the serious part of myself? Oh my God. Chapter 23. It's February of 1822. I am married now and settled down as Mrs. Huntington of Grassdale Manor. I have had 8 weeks' experience of matrimony, and do I regret the step I have taken? No, though I must confess in my secret heart that Arthur is not what I thought of him at first, and if I had known him in the beginning as thoroughly as I do now, I probably never would have loved him. And if I loved him first and then made the discovery, I fear I should have thought it my duty to not have married him. Damn. To be sure, I might have known him, for everyone was willing enough to tell me about him, and he himself was no accomplished hypocrite. But I was willfully blind, and now instead of regretting that I did not discern his full character before I was bound to him, I am glad, for it has saved me a great deal of battling my conscience, and a great deal of consequent trouble and pain. And whatever I ought to have done, my duty now is plainly to love him and cleave him, and this just tallies with my inclination. He's very fond of me, almost too fond. I could do with less caressing and more rationality. I should like to be less of a pet and more of a friend if I might choose. But I won't complain of that. I am only afraid his affection loses its depth where it gains in ardor. I sometimes liken it to a fire of dry twigs and branches compared with one of solid coal, very bright and hot. But if it should burn itself out and leave nothing but ashes behind, what shall I do? But it won't. It shan't. I am determined, and surely I have the power to keep it alive. So let me dismiss that thought at once. But Arthur is selfish. I am constrained to acknowledge that, and indeed the admission gives me less pain than might be expected, for since I love him so much, I can easily forgive him for loving himself. He likes to be pleased, and it is my delight to please him. And when I regret this tendency of his, it is for his own sake, not for mine. Which, if we remember the earlier discussion of Gilbert and his mom and his sister, and the mom talking about it's the wife's duty to please the man and it's the man's duty to please himself, do we see the parallels, right? Of now this is the conversation between her and Huntington and her accepting her fate as a wife to be able to do those things, but she's not satisfied in doing it, and Gilbert wouldn't be satisfied in having a wife that does that. Is so well written, dude. And so they go on to have this like much more detailed discussions of Christianity, and religion is something that Helen holds super, super near and dear to her heart. Huntington does not. She says, I will give my whole heart and my soul to my Maker if I can, and not one atom more of it to you than he allows. What are you, sir, that should set yourself up as a god and presume to dispute possession of my heart with him to whom I owe all I have and all I ever am, every blessing I ever did or ever can enjoy, and yourself among the rest? If you are a blessing, which I am half inclined to doubt. Don't be so hard upon me, Helen, and don't pinch my arm so. You are squeezing your fingers to the bone. Arthur, I continued, relaxing my hold of his arm, you don't love me half as much as I do you, and yet if you loved me far less than you do, I would not complain. Provided you loved your Maker more, I should rejoice to see you at any time so deeply absorbed in your devotions. that you had not a single thought to spare for me, but indeed I should lose nothing by the change, for the more you loved your God, the more deep and pure and true would be your love to me. It does not devote himself to the Lord as she does, and doesn't understand necessarily her like passion for religion, and it is becoming a wedge in their relationship because he is so a part of his vices and kind of like glorifying his, it's really ultimately his like alcohol and going on trips and like not taking his home seriously and like being, you know, this like proper godly man, really driving a wedge between them, right? And so when we go into chapter 24, it's their first quarrel. It's the name of the chapter. Huntington is getting tired, not of me, I trust, but of the idle, quiet life he leads, and no wonder, for he has so few sources of amusement. He never reads anything but newspapers and sporting magazines, and when he sees me occupied with a book, he won't let me rest till I close it. In fine weather, he generally manages to get through the time pretty well, but on rainy days, of which we have had a good many as of late, it is quite painful to witness him. I do all I can to amuse him, but it is impossible to get him to feel interested in what I most like to talk about, while on the other hand, he likes to talk about things that cannot interest me, or that even annoy me, and these please him the most of all. For his favorite amusement is to sit or loll beside me on the sofa and tell me stories of his former lovers, always turning upon the ruin of some confiding girl or the cozening of some unsuspecting husband, and when I express my horror and indignation, he lays it all to the charge of jealousy and laughs till the tears run down my cheeks. Insane, dude. The manipulation of this guy, literally just like torturing his wife with these like previous stories of his wild life, knowing that it bothers her, just to make her cry. Basically. Oh my gosh. And yeah, they have nothing in common whatsoever. The infatuation is finally fading. And in chapter 25, it begins the first absence. On the 8th of April, we went to London, and on the 8th of May, I returned in obedience to Arthur's wish, very much against my own because I left him behind. So he starts going on these like quote unquote work trips and doesn't take her with him, saying that she needs to stay in the country because she's happier there and, you know, she'll find peace or whatever. Really, in all actuality, he's going on these trips to go and be like a F-boy and go and party and hook up with women and drink and gamble and just wreak havoc across the freaking world. And she has all the money, right? She comes from a good family. And so he can deal with this. Like, he doesn't have to work. He's like literally just living off of her family's wealth, blowing it gambling and causing all these troubles and going on like months long hunting trips with his buddies. That is the extent of like the next following chapters in their relationship is literally just him every chance he gets leaving her for weeks and months at a time. And so she's writing in these letters to him, especially in this first one. Oh, Arthur, why won't you come? Why won't you write to me at least? You talked about my health. How can you expect me to gather bloom and vigor here, pining in solitude and restless anxiety from day to day? It would serve you right to come back and find my good looks entirely wasted. I would beg my uncle and aunt or my brother to come and see me, but I do not like to complain of my loneliness to them. And indeed, loneliness is the least of my sufferings. But what is he doing? What is it that keeps him away? Is the ever-recurring question, and the horrible suggestions it raises that distract me. Chapter 26, he's back. They have guests that come, and they stay for like weeks on end. We are 3 weeks into this guest's visit, and Annabella married Lord Loughborough, right? So it's the two of them that are there visiting and hanging out. And Helen is seeing the way that Huntington and Annabella flirt, and it is driving her absolutely crazy, but she's trying to pretend not to notice it because she doesn't want to be the freaking nagging wife, right? He's finally home after, again, being gone and causing all this trouble for God knows how long. She's going to cling to any time that she has with him and try not to like rock the boat when she does have her husband back. And in chapter 27, it escalates to the point that Helen, yet again, walks in on Annabella and Huntington a little bit too close for comfort, the exact same way that they did before they got married, like when they were all still like courting each other or whatever the terminology would be. Catches them again, and Huntington is like, no, it was just a joke, like it was nothing serious like that, like don't be dramatic about it. She says, Be quiet a moment, will you, Arthur? And listen to me. And don't think that I am in a jealous fury. I am perfectly calm. Feel my hand. And I gravely extended it toward him, but closed it upon his with an energy that seemed to disprove the assertion and made him smile. You needn't smile, sir, said I, still tightening my grasp and looking steadfastly on him till he almost quailed before me. You may think it all very fine, Mr. Huntington, to amuse yourself with rousing my jealousy, but take care that you don't rouse my hate instead, and when you have once extinguished my love, you will find it no easy matter to kindle it again. That is such a banger sentence. Oh my God. He's trying to play dumb with this whole Annabella thing, and Helen is not having it. She said, don't try to make me jealous. I swear to God, like, you are gonna make me hate you, and whenever I lose my love for you, it's not coming back. Like, you actually, genuinely will be dead to me. Keep it up. F around and find out, right? He's like, it's not like that. It's not like that. You know, you can't hate me as long as I love you. But how can I believe that you love me if you continue to act in this way? Just imagine yourself in my place. Would you think that I loved you if I did so? Would you believe my protestations and honor and trust me under such circumstances? The cases are different, he replied. It is a woman's nature to be constant, to love one and only one blindly, tenderly, and forever. Bless them, dear creatures, and you above them all. But you must have some commiseration for us, Helen. You must give us a little more license, for, as Shakespeare has it, however we do praise ourselves, our fancies are more giddy and unfirm, more longing, wavering, sooner lost than won than women's are. Do you mean by that your fancies are lost to me and won by Lady Loughborough, or Annabella? No, heaven is my witness that I think her mere dust and ashes in comparison with you, and shall continue to think so unless you drive me from you by too much severity. She is a daughter of earth, and you are an angel of heaven, only not too austere in your divinity, and remember that I am a poor, fallible mortal. Come now, Helen, won't you forgive me? Oh my God, dude, the audacity of this man. And so she's like, and if I forgive you, like, are you going to do it again? And he's like, I swear. She says, don't swear. I'll believe your word as well as your oath. I wish I could have confidence in either. Try me then, Helen. Only trust and pardon me this once, and you shall see. Come, I am in hell's torments till you speak the word. Oh my goodness gracious. And so she does end up forgiving him for this, right? She's like, okay, that's like your one strike, dude. Keep it up. Continues begging for her forgiveness, whatever. Everybody kind of moves on. But she runs into Annabella that night. And Annabella says, I think that if Loughborough were to commit such improprieties, I'd make him cry. I don't wonder you're being angry, for I'm sure I'd give my husband a lesson he would soon not forget for a lighter offense than that. But then he never will do anything of the kind, for I keep him in too good order for that. Helen says, are you sure you don't arrogate too much of the credit to yourself? Lord Loughborough was quite as remarkable for his abstemiousness for some time before you married him as he is now, I have heard. Oh, about the wine, you mean? Yes, he's safe enough for that. And as to looking askance to another woman, he's safe enough for that too. While I live, for he worships the very ground I tread on. Indeed, and are you sure that you deserve it? Why, as to that, I can't say. You know we're all fallible creatures, Helen. We none us deserve to be worshipped, but are you sure your darling Huntington deserves all the love you give him? I knew not what to answer to this. I was burning with anger, but I suppressed all the outward manifestations of it and only bit my lip and pretended to arrange my work. At any rate, resumed she, pursuing her advantage, you can console yourself with the assurance that you are worthy of all the love he gives you. You flatter me, I said, but at least I can try to be worthy of it. And then I turned to the conversation. Dude, again, just kind of like the cattiness of it all, right? So Annabella is like, man, that really sucks that your husband was flirting with me. Like, I would never let my husband get away with something like that. Helen, again, with the cattiness, she's like, oh, you think it's really because of you, or are you just dating a good man? Like, did you just marry a man who doesn't, fall for these like vices and all this other stuff? And yeah, the response that you are worthy of all the loves that he gives you, knowing and saying in the same breath that Huntington is not giving her any type of respect is wild. Wild behavior, dude. Chapter 28, Parental Feelings. December 25th. Last Christmas I was a bride with a heart overflowing with present bliss, in full ardent hopes for the future, though not unmingled with foreboding fears. Now I am a wife, my bliss is sobered but not destroyed, my hopes diminished but not departed. My fears increased, but not yet thoroughly confirmed, and thank heaven I am a mother too. God has sent me a soul to educate for heaven and give me a new, calmer bliss and stronger hopes to comfort me. Another year goes by before her next diary entry, December 25th, 1823. Another year is gone, and my little Arthur lives and thrives. I have need of consolation from my son, for, to this silent paper I may confess it, I have but little in my husband. I love him still, and he loves me in his own way, but oh, how different from the love I could have given, and once had hoped to receive. This is so sad. So, again, I guess we're like, 3 years into marriage at this point? And she's just realizing more and more of how much this is not what she signed up for. This is not what she wanted at all. Huntington is not what is commonly called a bad man. He has many good qualities, but he is a man without self-restraint or lofty aspirations. A lover of pleasure, given up to animal enjoyments. He is not a bad husband, but his notions of matrimonial duties and comforts are not my notions. Judging from appearances, his idea of a wife is a thing to love one devotedly, and to stay at home to wait upon her husband and amuse him and minister to his comfort in every possible way while he chooses to stay with her, and when he is absent to attend to his interests, domestic or otherwise, and patiently wait his return, no matter how he may be occupied in the meantime. Point being, he just wants a wife that will wait around and dote on him any chance that she gets and not care what he does outside of the home. And that's exactly what he's doing. He continues to go on these crazy weeks, months long trips, going to London, causing trouble, gambling, hooking up with women, drinking, blah, blah, blah. And Helen is just forced to stay home and take care of the baby and just dote on him when he does come back. It is, again, so sad, and I'm speeding through a lot of these chapters because this is an incredibly long book. It is 600 pages of very beautifully written emotions pertaining to all of these feelings and dealing with a spouse or a partner, whoever, that isn't giving you the attention that you need, not even just deserve, but that you need on a human level to feel valued and important and just alive. She really just kind of is going through this sheer loneliness out in the middle of nowhere all by herself with this baby. In chapter 29, those were 4 miserable months, alternating between intense anxiety, despair, and indignation, pity for him and pity for myself, and yet through it all I was not wholly comfortless. I had my darling, sinless, inoffensive little one to console me, but even this consolation was embittered by the constantly reoccurring thought, how shall I teach him hereafter to respect his father and yet avoid his example? So begins this side plot thing with this guy named Mr. Hargrave. He's their closest neighbor to them, and he is a close friend of Huntington's. And so while Huntington is on this crazy distant trips and stuff, Mr. Hargrave, more and more often, is showing up at her house or running into her and asking how she's doing and touching base and talking about Arthur. And telling her, in this instance, he says, yeah, I just returned from London yesterday and I saw Huntington there. She asks, is he well? Yes. That is, he said with increasing hesitation and an appearance of suppressed indignation. He was as well as he deserved to be, but under circumstances I should have deemed incredible for a man so favored as he. He looked up and pointed the sentence with a serious bow to me. I suppose my face was crimson. Pardon me, Miss Huntington, but I cannot suppress my indignation when I beheld such infatuated blindness and perversion of taste, but perhaps you are not aware. I am aware of nothing, sir, except that he delays his coming longer than I expected, and if at present he prefers the society of his friends to that of his wife, and the dissipations of the town to the quiet country life, I suppose I have those friends to thank for it. Their tastes and occupations are similar to his, and I don't see why his conduct should awaken either their indignation or surprise. Her saying, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know what he's doing, but considering you were there and partying with him, I'm not sure why you would talk ill of my husband, since you're just like him. You wrong me cruelly, answered he. I have shared but little with Mr. Huntington's society for the last few weeks, and as for his tastes and occupations, they are quite beyond me. Lonely wanderer as I am, where I have but sipped and tasted, he drains the cup to the dregs, and if ever for a moment I have sought to drown the voice of reflection in madness and folly, or if I have wasted too much of my time and talents among reckless and dissipated companions, God knows I would have gladly renounced them entirely and forever if I had but half the blessings that man so thanklessly casts behind his back, but half of the inducements to virtue and domestic orderly habits that he despises, but such a home and such a partner to share it with. It is infamous. And don't think, Mrs. Huntington, that I could be guilty of inciting him to perversion, to persevere in his present pursuits. On the contrary, I've remonstrated him again and again. I have frequently expressed my surprise at his conduct and reminded him of his duties and his privileges, but to no purpose. He only... Enough, Mr. Hargrave. You ought to be aware that whatever my husband's faults may be, it can only aggravate the evil for me to hear them from a stranger's lips. Am I a stranger then? I am your nearest neighbor, but your son's godfather and your husband's friend. May I not be yours also? Intimate acquaintance must precede real friendship. I know little of you, Mr. Hargrave, except from report. So, right, point being, he was in London. Her husband is, as I said, getting into all of this crazy behaviors. And Mr. Hargrave's point is, I've told him to knock it off and that he needs to appreciate what he has at home, i.e. such a beautiful wife and child and good life here, that he needs to be more appreciative of you. And this turns into, ultimately, like, the point being that Mr. Hargrave hits on her, and he's like, hey, like, you know, if I was your husband, this wouldn't be happening. Or if, like, you know, if you gave me a chance or if you befriended me, like, I could take care of you, like, blah, 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 right? That's what this is turning into here. They go on to also say how she expected Arthur to come home 3 weeks ago, and Mr. Hargrave is like, no, he never planned on coming back when he told you that. Like, he always planned on coming back this month. Like, he lied to you from the beginning. This upsets her, obviously, but he is coming home soon, finally. Freaking, again, after forever, he is coming home soon. And was I glad? Yes, delighted. Though I was angered by Huntington's conduct. In chapter 30, he comes home, has a wicked hangover, and makes it everybody's problem. He's yelling at everybody, screaming at the servant who ends up, like, dropping some silverware and it clatters on the ground. He just wants peace and quiet. He just wants silence. He doesn't want to hear his wife talk to him, doesn't want to deal with the kid, literally just wants to lay by the fire and just, like, reel from this hangover that he has, right? But Helen keeps pushing it. Is it impossible then to take care of yourself like a man when you go abroad? You told me that you could and would too, and you promised. Oh, come on, Helen. Don't begin with that nonsense now. I can't bear it. Can't bear what? To be reminded of the promises you have broken? And it is just this continuing issue. So eventually he pretty much tells her to shut up. So they're sitting in the living room area by the fire. He's laying down. She's at her chair reading. And she thinks he falls asleep, and so she starts to cry. But the second that she makes any noise, he wakes up to it, and he's like, what are you crying about now? Like, what is your problem? I'm crying for you, Arthur. Don't you know that you are a part of myself, and do you think that you can injure and degrade yourself and I not feel it? Degrade myself, Helen? Yes, degrade. What have you been doing all this time? You'd better not ask, he said with a faint smile. And you had better not tell, but you cannot deny that you have degraded yourself miserably. You have shamefully wronged yourself, body and soul, and me too, and I can't endure it quietly. I won't. And continues, she goes on to say of like, you are losing my love. Like, you are not being the man who you promised me to be. You are not being a good husband. You're not being a good partner. You're not even being a good man at this point. Like, you are being so ungodly and such a bad person. And so he says, what, you're just going to play a game and threaten to not love me anymore and take away your affections? I think it couldn't have been very genuine stuff to begin with if it's so easily demolished. If you don't mind, my pretty tyrant, you'll make me regret my choice in good earnest and envy my friend Hattersley and his meek little wife. He had her with him in London in all the season, and she was no trouble at all. He might amuse himself just as he pleased, in regular bachelor style, and she never complained of neglect. He might come home at any hour of the night or morning and not come home at all, be sullen, sober, or glorious drunk, and play the fool or the madam to his own heart's desire, without any fear or botheration. She never gives him a word of reproach or complaint. Do what he will. So ultimately, right, what he's saying is, dude, I wish you were like my friend's wife who doesn't care what he does. Like, she just lets him do anything, and she never ever complains to him. Like, you need to be more like that. Helen says, yeah, and she's miserable and she hates her life. I'm not doing that. And it ends up being this like entire back and forth. He dismisses her and then he ends up leaving again. Yet again, he goes, and this time he says, hey, if you have such a problem staying in the country, like, go to Stanningley, which is where her aunt and uncle live. He's like, go and visit them and, like, shut up. Like, leave me alone and go and distract yourself for a while. Like, let me just do what I'm gonna do. Again, literally so freaking sad and horrendous. And in chapter 31, we're at the end of another trip. He was gone for a couple of weeks. She visited her aunt and uncle. Everything was fine. She was back at the country. Blah, blah, blah. Just kind of like repeating this, like these whole ideas, right? This time, however, her father died during this time period. And she was never close with her father. She barely knew him, but she still wanted to mourn and to wear black. And Huntington refuses to let her wear black and to mourn for her father because he doesn't like the color. Hello? What do you mean? He's like, you barely knew the guy. Why do you even care? Like, you should care more about pleasing me, and I don't want to see you wear that color. Jesus Christ. And he wouldn't let her go to the funeral. Like, absolutely nothing. And she's like, well, I need to help my brother Frederick. My brother Frederick Lawrence. Mr. Lawrence, who is the owner of Wildfell Hall, is her brother. This whole time, Gilbert has been freaking out about this guy, and it has been her brother. We'll get to it. We'll unpack it in a minute, but this was like the first reveal, really, of saying Frederick as her brother. Oh my God, the drama, dude. So this was nearing the final nail in the coffin of his selfishness and his bad behavior, and her realizing how much of like a genuinely just crappy person that he is. And so in chapter 32, the title is Comparisons, Information Rejected. And their friends are visiting again. This time it's Millicent, and Hattersley is the one before that they were like, that Huntington was like, yeah, his wife lets him do anything. It's Millicent, the really, really quiet friend, the very, very meek friend. So in this visit, those two, that couple, is visiting Huntington and Helen. Helen and Millicent are talking. And she's like, yeah, I wish I could be more open with my husband. I wish I could tell him what was bothering me. And in the same breath, Hattersley talks to Helen, and he's like, I wish my wife talked to me more. I wish she was more engaged and cared about me and cared about things that were happening. And it's the complete opposite of Helen's relationship. That's why the title is like Comparisons, right? Because they don't talk enough, and they're both like deeply unhappy, versus Helen and Huntington, where they talk way too much and like hate each other for it. And it's just this whole thing. So it's just more domestic life and comparisons of relationships and expectations and just types of relationships for this time period. The ultimate thing, though, is like Hargrave is again involved in this. Like, he's also visiting, and they're talking to Helen and saying how Huntington behaves like 10 times worse than the two of them combined. Like, he is such a horrible person when he is out on these trips. Like, he just is completely reckless and does not care about their relationship or respecting her or anything. And she doesn't want to believe it because she's like, I think Hargrave just likes me, and he's trying to get, you know what I mean? He's trying to get with me, and so he's just trying to sow issues into my relationship. So she is yet again being told so consistently of how crappy her husband is, and she is still in denial to a point, right? She's still defending him, still trying to protect him and his personality, and thinking that she can fix him or help him or whatever, and just refusing to come to terms with the fact that he is actually just genuinely crappy. But by chapter 33, the friends are still visiting, and this time she overhears them, and they're talking about how Huntington is preoccupied with a woman, and she's so excited because she's like, oh my God, he's changing. He's making time for me. He's going to love me. And it turns out not the case. He is actually falling in love with and making out with Annabella, Lord Loughborough's wife, right? Annabella from way earlier, who's always been a problem. They are making out in a bush, and she catches them, doesn't say anything. She goes back inside. And when she confronts them, he just plays it off. He's like, don't worry about it. It's not your problem. As he has with absolutely everything else in their relationship. He's like, it shouldn't matter to you. You're still my wife. Good God. And so she then insists, she's like, fine, that's cool. You can do whatever you want then. But like, we are only husband and wife in name. I'm not doing anything with you ever again. Like I am, you're pretty much dead to me. Like, we are not in a relationship anymore. And so in chapter 34, it's the next day after this confrontation with him, after seeing them making out in the bush or whatever. And she is writing in her journal, how am I to get over the 10 or 12 days that must yet elapse before they go? And why so long for their departure, right? The guests. When they are gone, how shall I get through the months or years of my future life in company with that man, my greatest enemy? For none could injure me as he has done. Oh, when I think how fondly, how foolishly I have loved him, how madly I have trusted him, how constantly I have labored and studied and prayed and struggled for his advantage, and how cruelly he has trampled on my love, betrayed my trust, scorned my prayers and tears and efforts for his preservation, crushed my hopes, destroyed my youth's best feelings, and doomed me to a life of hopeless misery. As far as that man can do, it is not enough to say that I no longer love my husband. I hate him. The word stares me in the face like a guilty confession, but it is true. I hate him. I hate him. But God have mercy on his miserable soul and make him see and feel his guilt. I ask no other vengeance. If he could but finally know and truly feel my wrongs, I should be so well avenged and could freely pardon all. But he is so lost, so hardened to his heartless depravity, that in this life I believe he never will. But it is useless dwelling on this theme. Let me seek once more to dissipate reflection in the minor details of passing events. Oh my God. So she finally accepts that she actually hates her husband and there is no fixing it. He is so like up his own butt about doing whatever he wants to do that there is no hope for him. And he is not who she thought that he was. And she's finally accepted this. But again, this like godliness in her, this being a good womanness in her, doesn't want revenge on him, doesn't want anything. She just wants him to come to terms with realizing how crappy of a person he is. She wants him to at least feel guilty for what he has done. That is it. And even that is probably never going to happen because of how much of like a narcissist that he is, right? She runs into Lady Loughborough, into Annabella, right? They have the confrontation where she's like, yeah, I saw what you did with my husband. Like, I know what happened, blah, blah, blah. She's like, are you going to tell my husband? And she says, no. But what if I did? It makes Annabella cry. She freaks out about her husband finding out and, you know, whatever, whole thing. And then they end up keeping their distance for that remaining 13 days. In chapter 35, Annabella, knowing that Helen's not going to say anything and coming to terms with like Helen and Huntington's situation of like only being married in name, whenever her husband's not around, is just straight up all over Huntington and flirting with him, like in front of Helen. The like sheer and pure disrespect is wild, and Helen is getting more and more bitter about everything that's going on. And Annabella ends up like straight up telling her that she loves Huntington more than she ever could, and just like some crazy, crazy crap. I just, wild, man. That's all I can say is just how absolutely wild this whole situation is. In chapter 36, December 20th, 1824, this is the third anniversary of our felicitous union. It is now 2 months since our guests have left us to the enjoyment of each other's society, and I have had 9 weeks' experience of this new phase of conjugal life. 2 persons living together as master and mistress of the house and father and mother of a winsome, merry little child, with the mutual understanding that there is no love, friendship, or sympathy between them. As far as in me lies, I endeavor to live peaceably with him. I treat him with unimpeachable civility, give up my convenience to his wherever it may reasonably be done, and consult him in a business-like way on household affairs, deferring to his pleasure and judgment even when I know the latter to be inferior to my own. This is so sad. She goes on to think, I was infatuated once, a foolish, besotted affection that clung to him in spite of his unworthiness, but it is fairly gone now, wholly crushed and withered away, and he has none but himself and his vices to thank for it. He goes on to complain about how cold she is, and she's like, I don't want to hear it. You know, he goes on to continually complain about how bad of a wife she is and how cold she is toward him, and she's just, again, over it all, understandably so. In chapter 37, it has been another year, and she is even more weary of this life. And he's on yet another trip, and this time, Hargrave continues to pursue her and like come and talk to her whenever Huntington is out on these business trips and whatnot. And so one day, they're walking around together, and she is starting to think of him as a friend. And so she kind of opens up to him about this idea. She does not have any love left for her husband, not in the least. I knew that. I knew you were too high-minded and pure in your own nature to continue to regard one so utterly false and polluted with any feelings but those of indignation and scornful abhorrence. So Hargrave's all about it. He's like, good, I hope you don't like your husband. You shouldn't. He's a piece of crap. Is he not your friend? He was Hargrave replied, but do not wrong me by supposing that I could continue my friendship and esteem to a man who could so infamously, so impiously forsake and injure one so transcendently. Well, I won't speak of it, but tell me, do you never think of revenge? Revenge? No, what good would that do? It would make him no better and me no happier. I don't know how to talk to you, Mrs. Huntington. You are only half a woman. Your nature must be half human, half angelic. Such goodness overawes me. I don't know what to make of it. He continues to hit on her, and she's like, hey, you got to remember, I'm super religious, dude. I'm not going to like hook up with you or anything or try to be with you. Like, adultery is a sin. Screw off. And he goes on this whole thing of like, I truly love you, and I would never mention this subject again, but I have to tell you how much I love you, or like I couldn't, live in good conscience or whatever. Like, I'll support you and do whatever for you, baby. I love you so much. I'm so amazed by you. In chapter 38, it's the 5th wedding anniversary. She is spending it alone and is planning on leaving Huntington in secret. She is finally accepted that she has no choice but to leave him. And they're having another party. Yet again, they have all of these guests over. Yet again, Annabella is there. And she says, I swear to God, woman, if you are still having an affair with my husband, I'm telling your husband. Like, I'm telling your husband. I don't care. Knock it off. But it doesn't matter because, again, at the same time, one of those evenings, Lord Lowborough, or Annabella's husband, comes into the library to talk to Helen. And he's like, what the hell, man? You knew they were cheating on us? Like, why didn't you say anything to me? But he feels bad for Helen because he knows obviously she's like a victim of this whole like infidelity stuff as well. And so he ends up taking pity on her. There's a whole thing about like a duel. Like Lowborough is gonna challenge Huntington to a duel. They end up not doing it. And then that couple ends up leaving and then finds out that Annabella and Lowborough got a divorce, or they're at least living separately or whatever. She like ran off to London to go and live her best life. And now he's in the countryside somewhere taking care of their 2 kids. And just, I don't know, dude, freaking insanity. Chapter 39 is called A Scheme of Escape. My greatest source of uneasiness in this time of trial was my son, whom his father and his father's friends delighted to encourage in all embryo vices a little child can show, and to instruct in all the evil habits he could acquire. In a word, to make a man of him was one of their staple amusements, and I need say no more to justify my alarm on his account, and my determination to deliver him at any hazard from the hands of such instructors. So they'll be sitting there. All of Huntington's friends are over, right? Hattersley, Hargrave, Lowborough, everybody. And they're all just getting around, getting drunk, talking the little kid Arthur into cursing and drinking some of the alcohol as well. And, just talking crap to his mom and acting out and just being a terrible person. And she can't do anything to really stop it. But Mr. Hargrave suddenly rose from his seat with an aspect of stern determination, lifted the child from his father's knee where he was sitting half tipsy, cocking his head and laughing at me, and excrating me with words he little knew the meaning of, handed him out of the room, and setting him in the hall, held the door open for me, gravely bowed as I withdrew and closed it after me. I heard high words exchanged between him and his already half-inebriated host as I departed, leading away my bewildered and disconcerted boy. So Hargrave is at least trying to look out for her as much as he can while protecting her in a way and like trying not to rock the boat too much. And she, again, is realizing more and more of how much that she needs to leave. But what should I do? Apply to my brother and explain my circumstances and my resolves to him? No, even if I told him all of my grievances, which I should be very reluctant to do, he would be certain to disapprove of the step. It would seem like madness to him, as it would to my aunt and uncle or Millicent. No, I must have patience and gather a horde of my own. So she knows that she can't trust anybody to help save her from the situation. She's going to have to come up with a plan on her own, save up the money, get a game plan together, and like disappear into the night, right? She comes to this acknowledgement that this is the only way forward. On one of these days, she's talking to Hargrave. I think Huntington is gone again, and she's talking to Hargrave. And she tells him that she will leave Huntington. When and how? He asked eagerly. When I am ready, and how I can manage most effectually. But your child? My child goes with me. He will not allow it. I shall not ask him. Then it is a secret flight you mediate, but with whom, Mrs. Huntington? With my son and possibly his nurse. alone and unprotected, but where can you go and can you do? He will follow you and bring you back. I have laid my plans too well for that. Let me once get clear of Grassdale, and I shall consider myself safe. Hargrave goes on this whole spiel about, like, let me protect you, Helen. Like, run away with me. I love you so much. I'll take care of you. I'll do anything for you, blah, 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 blah. And she's like, I can take care of myself, actually. Like, knock it off. And he says, I worship you. You are my angel, my divinity. I lay my powers at your feet. He is, like, way over the top. That he is approaching her. So they're in the study room. And he is getting super, super worked up and approaching her about how much he loves her and, like, about to throw himself on her. And so she grabs her palette knife, right, her little artist knife, and says, stand off then, said I. He stepped back and listened to me. I don't like you. And if I were divorced from my husband, or if he dead, I would not marry you. There, now I hope you are satisfied. His face grew blanched with anger. I am satisfied, he replied with bitter emphasis, that you are the most cold-hearted, unnatural, ungrateful woman I have yet beheld. Goes on this whole thing now about how horrible of a person she is because she is turning him down. It's all fake. His infatuation with her and his support of her was all fake. Now that he can't get her at the end of it. Is it making more and more sense now why she's so standoffish about Gilbert? Right? Charity escaped one horrible man, and the other guy who had showed attention to her and tried to help her and said that he was madly in love with her, turned on her immediately after when she just wanted to be friends. Oh my God, this is so good. The final, like, nail in the coffin of all of this. She's putting her son to sleep one night, and he asks, Mama, why are you wicked? Who told you I was wicked, love? Rachel, the, like, nursemaid lady? No, Arthur, Rachel never said so, I'm certain. Well, then it was Papa, he replied thoughtfully. Then after a reflective pause, he added, at least I'll tell you how it was I got to know. When I'm with Papa, if I say Mama wants me or Mama says I am not to do something that he tells me to do, he always says, Mama be damned. And Rachel says it's only wicked people that are damned. So Mama, why I think you must be wicked and I wish you wouldn't. My dear child, I am not. Those are bad words, and wicked people often say them of others better than themselves. Those words cannot make people be damned nor show that they deserve it. God will judge us by our own thoughts and deeds, not by what others say about us. And when you hear such words spoken, Arthur, remember never to repeat them. It is wicked to say such things of others, not to have them said against you. Then it's Papa that's wicked? Papa is wrong to say such things, and you will be very wrong to imitate him now that you know better. What is imitate? To do as he does. Does he know better? Perhaps he does, but that is nothing to you. If he doesn't, you ought to tell him, Mama. I have told him. The little moralist paused and pondered. I tried in vain to divert his mind from the subject. I'm sorry that Papa's wicked, he said mournfully at length, for I don't want him to go to hell. And so saying, he burst into tears. I consoled him with the hope that perhaps his papa would alter and become good before he died. But is it not time to deliver him from such a parent? Chapter 50, she is in the middle of writing in her diary, and she didn't realize that Huntington was standing behind her. And so, unknown to me, and actuated by some base spirit of curiosity, he had been looking over my shoulder, for I know not how long, for when I had laid aside my pen and was about to close the book, he suddenly placed his hand upon it, saying, with your leave, my dear, I'll have a look at this. He digs through all of her journal, and finds out her plans to leave him, and confronts her. And so he said at length, you thought to disgrace me, did you, by running away and turning artist and supporting yourself by the labor of your hands, forsooth? And you thought to rob me of my son too and bring him up to be a dirty Yankee tradesman or a low beggarly painter? Yes, to obviate his becoming such a gentleman as his father. It's well you couldn't keep your own secret. It's all well these women must be blabbing. If they haven't a friend to talk to, they must whisper their secrets to the fishes or write them on the sand or something. And it's well, too, I wasn't over full tonight, now that I think of it, or I might have snoozed away and never dreamt of looking what my sweet lady was about, or I might have lacked the sense or the power to carry my point like a man as I have done. Digs through the journal, realizes that she is planning on running away from him to become a painter. And that was her whole plan, is she's going to run away and paint, and that's how she was going to, and like sell them, and that's how she was going to make money for herself and be able to live on her own. And he, in reaction to this, burns and destroys all of her painting supplies, and takes all of her money and her jewels to make sure that she can't run away from him. And she is overwhelmed with this feeling of like being a prisoner and being in hell. And she said, I am forbidden to rescue my own son from ruin. What was once my only consolation is become the crowning source of my despair. And she just prays to God for mercy and for relief and to get away from this situation. It is so incredibly sad. And again, like such a realistic to modern day thing of like women trying to get out of abusive relationships and then getting discovered, and then just the secret and the planning and the whatever that has to go into getting away and getting away safely from something is just insane that it has survived and continued 200 years later. In chapter 41, Huntington is gone yet again, and she's doing everything that she can to make sure that her son is like rooted of the weeds of his mind. So like all of the bad things and the cursing and the whatever that the dad is trying to like instill in the son, to make sure that he doesn't like follow in these footsteps, and he knows that that behavior is not okay. And goes on as far as to, this is the beginning of her giving him wine whenever he's sick, and trying to like poison the kid's brain against liking alcohol like his father. And her brother ends up visiting her, or her brother or something. She ends up finally talking to Frederick and asks him, do you know of what sort of man Huntington is? I think I have an idea. Have you so clear an idea that you can hear without surprise or disapproval that I meditate escaping with that child to some secret asylum where we can live in peace and never see him again? Is it really so? If you have not, continued I, I'll tell you something more about him. And I gave a sketch of his general conduct and a more particular account of his behavior with regard to his child, and explained my apprehensions on the latter's account and my determination to deliver him from his father's influence. Frederick was exceedingly indignant against Mr. Huntington, and very much grieved for me. But still he looked upon my project as wild and impractical. He deemed my fears for Arthur disproportionate to the circumstances, and opposed so many objections to my plan, and devised so many milder methods for ameliorating my condition, that I was obliged to enter into further details to convince him that my husband was utterly incorrigible, and that nothing could persuade him to give up his son. Whatever became of me, he was fully determined the child should not leave him. As I was not able to leave the child, and that, in fact, nothing would answer but this, unless I fled the country as I intended before. And so she finally gets Frederick in on it, in on this plan for her to leave. So Frederick goes home knowing that hopefully soon, one of these days, she will appear on his doorstep, and he will rent her Wildfell Hall. Like, she will live in Wildfell Hall, and they will just pretend that they are not siblings, like pretend that she's just a regular tenant and he has no idea who she is, to like help hide her identity, right? Oh my God. And then the only other thing to note is like she's talking to Millicent and Millicent's little sister named Esther, and talking to Esther about getting married. She's a lot younger and she's of that age where they're like trying to court her. Helen gives her the advice of, when I tell you not to marry without love, I do not advise you to marry for love alone. There are many, many other things to be considered. Keep both heart and hand in your own possession till you see good reason to part with them. And if such an occasion should never present itself, comfort your mind with this reflection, that though in single life your joys may not be very many, your sorrows at least will not be more than you can bear. Marriage may change your circumstances for the better, but in my private opinion, it is far more likely to produce a contrary result. Pretty much the whole idea of like, don't settle, or it actually won't be settling. It'll just be like miserable, life-ruining sadness, more so than anything else. In chapter 42, the Hattersleys, so Millicent and her husband, visit Helen. And Hattersley is completely reformed now. Like he's sober, he's not causing trouble. He and his wife are talking, and it's just happiness. And so she is excited because at least something good came out of everything, and she can now leave the area knowing that at least someone is happy, at least Millicent is happy. In chapter 43, Huntington returns from the trip and says that he has found a governess, so like a teacher for Arthur, and Helen is upset by this because she's like, I can teach him for a couple more years. We don't need somebody like that. Like, you have taken everything else from me. At least let me continue to teach my child and get some type of joy and purpose out of this life. Well, it turns out the governess isn't really for Arthur. it's for Huntington because he's gonna have an affair with this governess. That with that knowledge, with realizing that that is what is happening, she's like, okay, the plan has to go. We have to leave, actually, genuinely, like right now. And so she ends up talking to Rachel and telling her what the plan is and saying, hey, sorry for the short notice. Like, I'll give you, a little bit of money, so you can get things figured out and get your life together. I'm so sorry for the short notice. Like, we are going to leave, though. And Rachel says, honey, I'm coming with you. Oh, she's like, I've been with you since you were a child. I am attached to you and I'm attached to your child. Like, I'm coming with you. You can't get rid of me like that. She's like, Rachel, I'm not going to be able to pay you and we might just be like broke. We have nothing to our names. It's going to be a struggle and I'm not going to be able to give you what you deserve. Rachel says, I don't care. We're in this together, girl, which is so wholesome and so sweet. The two of them and Arthur are going to be leaving soon. But before they do, she's going to write letters. So she writes 3 letters. The first one is to Frederick, her brother, giving him a heads up of that she'll be there soon. She's going to send it, and then in 2 days they're going to leave, so it has time to get to him and he can prepare the rooms for them and whatnot. The next letter is to Millicent, telling her slight detail about what's going on and that she's going to leave and that she'll write and let her know eventually when she's like safe and sound. The third was to my aunt, and much more difficult and a painful undertaking, and therefore I had left it to last, but I must give her some explanation of that extraordinary step I had taken, and that quickly, for she and my uncle would no doubt hear of it within a day or two of my disappearance, as it was probable that Mr. Huntington would speedily apply to them to know what had become of me. At last, however, I told her I was sensible of my error. I did not complain of its punishment, and I was sorry to trouble my friends with its consequences. But in duty to my son, I must submit no longer. It was absolutely necessary that he should be delivered from his father's corrupting influence. These things were done yesterday. I have given 2 whole days to the preparation for our departure, that Frederick may have more time to prepare the rooms and Rachel to pack the things, for the latter task must be done with the utmost caution and secrecy, and there is no one but me to assist her. I can help to get the articles together, but I do not understand the art of stowing them into boxes, so as to take up the smallest possible space, and there are her own things to do, as well as mine and Arthur's. I can ill afford to leave anything behind since I have no money, except a few guineas in my purse. And besides, as Rachel observed, whatever I left would most likely become the property of Mrs. Myers, the governess, and I should not relish that. She goes down to dinner that night with Huntington, and she is too antsy about everything going on and the fact that they're going to be leaving that night that she doesn't eat. And Mr. Huntington notices this, and so he says, "What's to do with you now?" said he when the removal of the second course gave him time to look about him. "I am not well," I replied. "I think I must lie down a little. You won't miss me much?" "Not the least. If you leave your chair, it'll do just as well. Better, a trifle," he muttered as I left the room, "for I can fancy someone else fills it." Somebody else may fill it tomorrow, I thought, but I did not say. "There, I've seen the last of you, I hope," I muttered as I closed the door upon him. Oh my goodness, that's so sad. In chapter 44, she writes in her journal, October 24th, "Thank heaven I am free and safe at last." So they made it. They made it to Wildfell. They got settled. Everything was fine. Lawrence, right, Mr. Lawrence, came that morning, and I have had several interviews with him since, but he is obliged to be very cautious when and how he comes. Not even his servants or his best friends must know of his visits to Wildfell, except on such occasions as a landlord might be expected to call upon a stranger tenant, lest suspicion should be excited against me, whether of the truth or of some slanderous falsehood. I have now been here nearly a fortnight, and but that one disturbing care, the haunting dread of discovery, I am comfortably settled in my new home. Frederick has supplied me with all requisite furniture and painting materials. Rachel has sold most of my clothes for me in a distant town, and procured me a wardrobe more suitable to my present position. I have a second-hand piano and a tolerably well-stocked bookcase in my parlor, and my other room has assumed a quite a professional, business-like appearance already. I am working hard to repay my brother for all his expenses on my account. Not that there is the slightest necessity for anything of the kind, but it pleases me to do so. I shall have so much more pleasure in my labor, my earnings, my frugal fare, and household economy, when I know that I am paying my way honestly, and that what little I possess is legitimately all my own, and that no one suffers for my folly. This is so freaking cute. And then she ends up finding her photo or her painting of Huntington's face. How widely different had been my feelings in painting the portrait to what they are now looking upon it. How I had studied and toiled to produce something as I thought worthy of the original. And it seems Mr. Huntington, and so, yeah, reflecting on that and how much she just is over Huntington and she does not love him at all. And she says, it seems Mr. Huntington is taking every exertion to discover the place of my retreat. He has been in person to Stanningley, or the aunt and uncle's residence, seeking redress for his grievances, expecting to hear of his victims, if not to find them there, and has told so many lies with such unblushing coolness that my uncle more than half believes him and strongly advocates my going back to him and being friends again. But my aunt knows better. She is too cool and cautious and too well acquainted with both my husband's character and my own to be imposed upon by any specious falsehoods the former could invent. Oh. Now, diary entries from her time at Wildfell. And on the 30th, she says, alas, my kind neighbors will not let me alone. By some means, they have ferreted me out, and I have had to sustain visits from 3 different families, all more or less bent upon discovering who and what I am, whence I came, and why I have chosen such a home as this. Their society is unnecessary to me, to say the least, and their curiosity annoys and alarms me. If I gratify it, it may lead to ruin of my son. And if I am too mysterious, it will only excite their suspicions, invite conjecture, and rouse them to greater exertions, and perhaps by means of spreading my fame from parish to parish till it reaches the ears of someone who will carry it to the Lord of Grassdale Manor. So also, right, explaining, and we're getting her point of view about why she was so distant and mysterious and standoffish to all of her neighbors, and why she's had this like weird air about her that they've all been trying to crack, and all the gossip and stuff, and why she's been so worried about it happening. And her diary entries end on November 3rd. I have made some further acquaintance with my neighbors, the fine gentleman and beau of the parish and its vicinity. In his own estimation, at least, is a young... Here it ended. The rest was torn away. How cruel, just when she was going to mention me. For I could not doubt it was your humble servant she was about to mention, though not very favorably, of course. I could tell that, as well as those few words, as by the recollection of her whole aspect and demeanor towards me in the commencement of our acquaintance. Well, I could readily forgive her prejudice against me and her hard thoughts of our sex in general, when I saw what brilliant specimens her experience had limited. So, we're back into Gilbert's POV, right? He finally finishes reading all of these letters, and he's like, yeah, you know what? Actually, that checks out. I understand now why she hated me so much when we first met, and I don't blame her whatsoever. And you love a man who understands. And so in chapter 45, he is writing to his friend, and he says, well, Halford, the friend's name, what do you think of all this? And while you read it, did you ever picture yourself what my feelings would probably be during its perusal? Most likely not, but I'm going to descant upon them now. I will only make this acknowledgement, little honorable as it may be to human nature, and especially to myself, that the former half of the narrative was to me more painful than the latter. Not that I was at all insensible to Mrs. Huntington's wrongs or unmoved by her sufferings, but I must confess I felt a kind of selfish gratification in watching her husband's gradual decline in her good graces, in seeing how completely he extinguished all of her affections at last. The effect of the whole, however, in spite of all of my sympathy for her and my fear against him, was to relieve my mind of an intolerable burden and fill my heart with joy as if some friend had aroused me from a dreadful nightmare. So he then continues to tell his friend about how the very next morning after he finished these letters, he rushes back to Wildfell Hall to talk to Helen. Have you looked it over? She murmured. I've read it through, and I want to know if you forgive me. If you can, forgive me. Can you forgive me? It might be deemed a breach of trust, I thought, to convey that lily hand to my lips, so I only gently pressed it between my own and smilingly replied, I hardly can. You should have told me this before. It shows a want of confidence. Oh, no, cried she, eagerly interrupting me. It was not that. It was no want of confidence in you. But if I had told you anything of my history, I must have told you all in order to excuse my conduct, and I might well shrink from such disclosure till necessity obliged me to make it. But you forgive me? I have done very, very wrong, I know, but as usual, I have reaped the bitter fruits of my own error and must reap them to the end. And this time, He does raise her hand to his lips and fervently kisses it again and again. And she says, "Now, Gilbert, you must leave me, not this moment, but soon, and you are to never come again." "Never come again, Helen, just when I love you more than ever. For that very reason, if it be so, we should not meet again. I thought this interview was necessary. At least I persuaded myself that it was so, that we might severely ask and receive each other's pardon for the past. But there can be no excuse for another. I shall leave this place as soon as I have means to seek another asylum, but our intercourse must end here." And so he is heartbroken again, because he has had this like emotional whiplash roller coaster thing of everything with her, and he thought this was finally the end and they would understand each other, and he knows her now and that they can be together. "Instead of acting like a true friend," she continued, breaking from me and throwing herself into the old armchair, "and helping me with all your might, or rather taking your own part in the struggle of right against passion, you leave all the burden to me, and not satisfied with that, you do your utmost to fight against me when you know that." He says, "Forgive me, Helen. Can we just be friends?" And she says, "No, we can't. We love each other too much." And it's this like whole thing. And she's like, "You don't want to be with me. You're young. And I am young in years, but I am old in sorrow. And even if trouble should fail to kill me before vice destroys him, think if he reached but 50 years or so, would you wait 20 or 15 in vague uncertainty and suspense, through all the prime of youth and manhood, and marry at last a woman faded and worn as I shall be, without ever having seen me from this day to that? You would not. Or if you would, you should not. Trust me, Gilbert. Matter, I know better than you. You think me cold and stony-hearted, but blah, 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 blah." Because she's like, "I can't be with you, and I've already sinned enough leaving my husband, but I'm not gonna also be like an adulteress on top of this. Like, I can't pursue a relationship with you when I get money and disappear, da da da." Like, it's this whole entire thing. And he keeps pushing back on it. She says, "In 6 months, you shall hear from Frederick precisely where I am. And if you still retain your wish to write me, and think you can maintain a correspondence, all thought, all spirit, such as disembodied souls or unimprisoned friends at least might hold, write, and I will answer you." He says, 6 months? She says, "Yes, to give your present ardor time to cool, and to try the truth and constancy of your soul's love for mine." This whole just confessions of love to each other. This is absolutely freaking insane. He leaves this conversation with her and realizing exactly who Lawrence is, and his gratitude actually for Mr. Lawrence taking care of his own sister and taking care of Helen and doing all this stuff. Gilbert goes to Mr. Lawrence's house and to apologize and to say as much. Mr. Lawrence is like, "Oh my God, dude, get out of here. Like, I'm not in the state to fight you right now. Like, good Lord, leave me alone. Like, have you not done enough?" Reveals that he knows that they are siblings. Says that she told me herself. She told me all. She knew I might be trusted, but you needn't disturb yourself about that, Mr. Lawrence, for I have seen the last of her. And he says, "Good. It's nothing against you, as long as you keep your good resolution and remaining aloof from her. But like, you do need to leave her alone and let her like find happiness and find peace, and you guys wouldn't work out and blah, 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 blah." And so for the next 2 months, they continued to keep their distance from each other. And in that 2-month period, she didn't go to church. She hardly left the house after this like big reveal and conversation and agreement that Helen and Gilbert will no longer speak. He never went to the house. He only knew that she was there because whenever he would run into Mr. Lawrence, he would ask for an update and to make sure that she was still doing okay. But around this 2-month period of them keeping distance and doing their own things, Eliza, right, his like little girlfriend thing from way earlier that loves to be a little gossip and was a little bitter about him turning his attention to Mrs. Graham, to Helen. She says, "Hey, did you hear? She went home to her husband." Gilbert is like, "What the F are you talking about?" Goes over to Mr. Lawrence. Turns out Huntington is dying. He has no family. He has no nurses. There's nobody to take care of him. And so Helen has taken it upon herself to return home to the Grassdale Manor to take care of Huntington in his like dying days, because that is her wifely duty. Like, that is her job. And she might not love him now, but that is like still the father of her child. And she has this like religious devotion, but also just like the kind of person that she is. She feels the need to go home and take care of him. And Gilbert, like, to some degree, does not understand this whatsoever. He's like, "I thought she didn't love him. Like, I don't understand why she would do such a thing." But also understanding she is such like this heavenly angel person. And so over the next period where she is back in Grassdale, she never talks to Gilbert still, but Gilbert will go to Lawrence's house and talk to him and make Lawrence read him the letters from Helen. And the one thing that he begs Lawrence to write is to ask Helen to give Gilbert permission to clear her name. Ask her, please, let me tell all these people that they were wrong about her and that their assumptions are incorrect and let me protect her, please. Okay, that's fine. She agrees to it. And so he does. The other thing kind of in this time, he and, Mr. Lawrence are getting closer and closer in friendship. And he ends up telling Mr. Lawrence of the one girl that he was pursuing that was local. He's like, yeah, she sucks, actually. She's one of the reasons that all these rumors started. She hates your sister, so you can't pursue her. Whole back and forth bro code thing, looking out for each other, though. I'm trying to see if there's any other stuff. This video has taken so much longer than I expected it to. I just love talking about this stuff, and the book is so long. It's so hard to, condense a lot of it. But one of the excerpts is, in the letter that Helen writes her brother, she's talking about how Huntington was upset almost at her return. He says, "Oh, the sweet revenge," cried he, "and you can enjoy it with such quiet conscience too, because it's all in the way of duty. It is well for me that I am doing my duty," said I with bitterness that I could not repress, for it is the only comfort I have. In the satisfaction of my own conscience, it seems, is the only reward I need look for. He looked rather surprised at the earnestness of my manner. "What reward did you look for? You will think me a liar if I tell you, but I did hope to benefit you, as well as better your mind, as to alleviate your present sufferings, but it appears I am to do neither. Your own bad spirit will not let me. As far as you are concerned, I have sacrificed my own feelings, and all the little earthly comfort that was left me, to no purpose, and every little thing I do for you is ascribed to self-righteous malice and refined revenge." So his whole thing is Huntington obviously wanted her, that. How else would she know that this was happening to him? But when she comes back, he's like, "Oh, I bet you love this. I bet you love to watch me be sick. I bet you're getting some sick satisfaction from this, so that you can take care of me and know that I'm going to hell, and this just makes you more righteous." This a whole, again, just bitter, abusive, horrible man to the very, very end, right? And she closes this letter. "I find myself in rather a singular position. I am exerting my utmost endeavors to promote the recovery and reformation of my husband. And if I succeed, what shall I do? My duty, of course, but how? No matter, I can perform the task that is before me now, and God will give me strength to do whatever He requires hereafter. Goodbye, dear Frederick." So again, in doing her duty, all she is trying to do is take care of her husband and try to get him to go to heaven and whatnot. And just make sure that he can die peacefully. And so he asks her if he says, "Will you not forgive me then?" And she says, "I have forgiven you, but I know you cannot love me as you once did, and I should be very sorry if you were to, for I could not pretend to return it. So let us drop the subject and never recur to it again. By what I have done for you, you may judge it of what I will do, if it not be incompatible with the higher duty I owe to my son. And if you wish me to feel kindly toward you, it is deeds, not words, which must purchase my affection and esteem." They continue to write these letters back and forth. Helen continues to talk to Lawrence. Gilbert continues to be obsessed with Helen and just wanting to know what's going on. And at the very end of chapter 49, Helen ends her letter. "His body will be consigned on Thursday to that dark grave he so much dreaded, but the coffin must be closed as soon as possible. If you will attend the funeral, come quickly, for I need help." Before that letter, though, she's talking about Huntington's fear of going to hell, and he doesn't really take much solace or much of this whole religion thing that she's trying to put upon him. Helen, at that point, just kind of has to accept that she has done all she can for his soul, and if he does go to hell, his soul will be, purified and end up with God at the end of it anyway, and that's how she finds her peace in the whole situation, which is crazy. I don't know, dude. This book is just wild. In chapter 50, Gilbert is happy. To be frank, he's happy that Huntington is dead, right? He was a piece of shit. And also, he's happy that now Helen is free from all of this trouble that she's dealt with. But also he's a little bitter because she's never said anything about him in any of her letters. And, it would be a dream if she were to regain her feelings for him, for Gilbert, if she were to be happy and joyful again and accept his advances. Gilbert decides to wait for the agreed upon 6 months before he writes her a letter to Grassdale Manor to contact her. So he's being patient. He's writing out the time. I don't know. I didn't look at the dates of how long it had been, but I think it had only been a couple of weeks that she was actually taking care of Huntington. So he has to wait quite a while. And in the meantime, Lawrence ends up leaving to go on some work thing, and so he and Gilbert continue to write letters back and forth to each other, just keeping up on each other's lives. Nothing too crazy. We get a little bit more information about what happened with all of the side characters that we've mentioned before that I don't really care to repeat to you now because it's not really, I just don't care. It's not really relevant. And then in chapter 51, Gilbert is out just making his rounds around town, and he hears from Eliza. Again, this little snooty, gossipy person. Mr. Lawrence's sister's going to be married on Thursday. Gilbert is like, oh my God, is the guy's named Hargrave? And Gilbert asks, and she's like, yeah, his name's Hargrave. She's going to marry this guy. Gilbert loses his mind. He's like, oh my God, I've missed my chance, and she's going to marry that guy. Oh my God. So he rushes as fast as he can to get to Grassdale Manor and to try and like crash this wedding. But it's snowy, so it delays him getting there, and then he ends up showing up to the church, and there's a bunch of carriages, and he's like, oh my God, I've missed it. Like, here come the bride and groom now. And they come through the church doors, leaving the church after the ceremony, and it's not Helen and Mr. Hargrave. It's Frederick Lawrence and Millicent's sister, who Helen gave the advice to before about, like, not settling and marry for love and happiness and stuff. They got married. And so Lawrence sees Gilbert, and he's like, what are you doing here? And Gilbert's like, what are you doing here? What are you doing getting married? Whole back and forth thing. And then Lawrence rushes to Grassdale Manor. Turns out it's abandoned and that Helen has moved to her aunt and uncle's property, the Statingley property thing. He finally gets there, and like through all of this, right, he sees Grassdale, and it's a beautiful freaking property. And he's like, oh my God, she's a widow with this property now and owns all of this, and she has so much money, and she's so classy and above everything that I ever am or could be, because I'm just a lowly little farmer dude, right, out in the moors. And you know, she's this like established woman. Like, of course she's not going to have any interest in me. And when he goes to Statingley to try and find her there, that is an even better manor. It's even more beautiful. He is just like even more demoralized about how much that like she would never even spare him another glance. Like, he's lost any opportunity to be with her, right? And as he's about to like leave and accept this and give up on everything, he hears Arthur call out to him in one of the carriages that's going by. And Arthur says, Mama, here's Mr. Markham. Like, his last name, I haven't said Markham in a very, very long time, but he says Gilbert's last name. I did not hear the reply, but presently the same voice answered, it is indeed, Mama, look for yourself. I did not raise my eyes, but I suppose Mama looked, for a clear, melodious voice, whose tones thrilled through my nerves, exclaimed, oh, Aunt, here's Mr. Markham, Arthur's friend. Stop, Richard. That was the carriage driver. There was such evidence of joyous, though suppressed excitement in the utterance of those few words, especially that tremulous, oh, Aunt, that it threw me almost off guard. The carriage stopped immediately, and I looked up and met the eye of a pale, grave, elderly lady surveying me from the open window. She bowed, and so did I, and then she withdrew her head while Arthur screamed to the footman to let him out. But before the functionary could descend from his box, a hand was silently put forth from the carriage window. I knew that hand, though a black glove concealed its delicate whiteness in half its fair proportions, and quickly seizing it, I pressed it in my own, ardently for a moment, but instantly recollecting myself, I dropped it, and it was immediately withdrawn. And so she's like, what are you doing here? He says, I came to see the place. She says, you came to see the place? Like, really disappointed. She's like, you didn't come to see me? She doesn't say that though. Anyway, so finally they end up, they go inside. He and her are talking, and she says, tell me how you are all at Lindenhope. It's the name of the town that they were in. Has nothing happened since I left you? I believe not. Nobody dead? Nobody married? No. Or expecting to marry? No old ties dissolved or new ones formed? No old friends forgotten or supplemented? She dropped her voice so low in the last sentence that no one could have caught the concluding words but myself, and at the same time turned her eyes upon me with a dawning smile, almost sweetly melancholy, and a look of timid though keen inquiry that made my cheeks tingle with inexpressible emotion. I believe not. Certainly not if others are as little changed as I. And did you really not mean to call? I feared to intrude. To intrude? Oh, that's so cute, right? Because it's like, hey, we waited the 6 months and we're still thinking of each other, right? Like, you didn't move on? And he's like, no, you didn't move on? And she's like, no. And then it's like, oh, they waited for each other. It's so wholesome and cute. And so then she's like, so why didn't you bother calling me? And he's like, I didn't want to bother you. I didn't want to interrupt. You had things going on and everything was crazy. It's this whole thing. And she ends up finally, she picks a rose and gives it to him. Again, we're bringing it back to the beginning of when he visited her at Wildfell and she had planted the flowers from his sister, and he had asked for one, and she said no. And then now she's giving him a rose and saying, hey, this is a representation. It's a winter rose. It has survived. Hold on, what does it say? This rose is not so fragrant as a summer flower, but it has stood through hardships none of them could bear. The cold rain of winter has sufficed to nourish it, and the faint sun to warm it. The bleak winds have not bleached it or broken its stem, and the keen frost has not blighted it. Look, Gilbert, it is still fresh and blooming as a flower can be with the cold snow. Even now on its petals will you have it. And also the whole rose thing and talking about bloom in reference and correlating to her being out in the country and blooming, and the whole thing of Huntington forcing her to stay in the country and being lonesome and stuff was so that she could bloom in the country. And now it's like she has bloomed and she's survived all of these hardships, and now she's finally giving her heart to him. Oh my God, the symbolism, bro. They have a little bit more back and forth, and she says, the rose I gave you was an emblem of my heart, said she. Would you take it away and leave me here alone? Would you give me your hand too if I ask? Have I not said enough? She answered with the most enchanting smile. I snatched her hand and would have fervently kissed it, but suddenly checked myself and said, but have you considered the consequences? Hardly, I think, or I should not have offered myself to one too proud to take me or too indifferent to make his affections outweigh my worldly goods. Stupid blockhead that I was. I trembled to clasp her in my arms, but dared not believe it in so much joy, yet restrained myself to say, but you should repent. It would be your fault, she replied. I never shall unless you bitterly disappoint me. If you have not sufficient confidence in my affection to believe this, let me alone. My darling angel, my own Helen, you never shall repent if it depend on me alone, but have you thought of your aunt? She says, I have thought of my aunt. You have to give it another year. Let my aunt get to know you and get approval of you, and then we can marry and we can be together. Like my aunt will think I'm being rash and just like moving on too quickly. So just give us a year of like us, courting and whatnot and like friendships. And he agrees, obviously, agrees to this, is more than happily to agree to this. They lived like happily ever after, right? And so he ends this letter to his friend. It is time to bring my narrative to a close. Anyone but you would say I had made it too long already, but for your satisfaction, I will add a few words more because I know you will have a fellow feeling for the old lady and will wish to know the last of her history. I did come again in spring, and agreeably to Helen's injunctions, did my best to cultivate her acquaintance. She received me very kindly, having been, doubtless, already prepared to think highly of my character by her niece's too favorable report. I turned my best side out, of course, and we got along marvelously well together. When my ambitious intentions were made known to her, she took it more sensibly than I had ventured to hope. Her only remark on the subject in my hearing was, and so, Mr. Markham, you are going to rob me of my niece, I understand? Well, I hope God will prosper your union and make my dear girl happy at last. Could she have been contented to remain single, I own I should have been better satisfied, but if she must marry again, I know of no one now living and suitable of age to whom I would more willingly resign her than yourself, or who would be more likely to appreciate her worth and make her truly happy, as far as I can tell. Of course, I was delighted with the compliment and hoped to show her that she was not mistaken in her favorable judgment. I have, however, one request to offer, continued she. It seems I am still to look on Stanningley as my home. I wish to make it as yours likewise, for Helen is attached to the place and to me, as am I to her. There are painful associations connected with Grassdale, which she cannot easily overcome, and I shall not molest you with any of my company or my interference here. I am a very quiet person, and shall keep to my own apartments and attend my own concerns, and only see you now and again. So obviously he agrees to this, and so they all move in together into Stattingley, and they live happily until the aunt ends up passing away a few years after. He got married in the summer on a glorious August morning. It only took 8 months and all of Helen's kindness and goodness to boot to overcome my mother's prejudices and my bride-elect. As for myself, I need not tell you how happily my Helen and I have lived together and how blessed we are still in each other's society and in the promising young scions that are growing up about us. We are just now looking forward to the advent of you and Rose, for the time your annual visit draws nigh, when you must leave your dusty, smoky, noisy, toiling, striving city for a season of invigorating relaxation in social retirement with us. June 10th, 1847. The end. He got the girl. He got the girl in the end. And she got to leave her husband and whatever and still maintain her like religious beliefs. And oh my God, dude, this was such a freaking wholesome book. I loved this one so much. It was so empowering. and relatable. And like I said, still like rings so true 200 years later for like the feelings of discontentment in a relationship with like such a crappy person, or like a narcissist, and just like somebody who's just incredibly selfish, and the loneliness there, and the wanting to move on, and the joy, and I don't know, the independence. And there's a point in there too, I don't remember where exactly, I can't remember where it was, and I never highlighted it, but she slammed the door in her husband's face. And there's some like things that I was reading about how it was it could be heard across the country, like when the book came out, because that was such a foreign concept, to speak illy of your husband to that degree, to be so disrespectful of your husband, to talk about these vices and alcoholism and the gambling and all the issues that the husband got into. It was not commonplace, and it was like very gross to talk about in such a way. Oh my God, dude. But how well written and beautiful and just good. I don't know. I love it. I love the longing. I love a man who loves a woman. I say it all the time. I love a man who loves a woman. Gilbert might be a little goofy and obsessive about it, but my God, that's so romantic. And she was so relatable and independent and doing the best for her kid and herself, and in like the whole painting thing. It was just, I don't know. I love that book so much. And again, part of me, like, I understand, I guess, part of Charlotte's pushback on not wanting to have it be released and have that be her sister's like last known piece of literature. But then some people, I guess there's like contradicting opinions too about if Charlotte made the decision to not publish it anymore because she was like jealous of the talent and of the skill in the storytelling, and that she didn't want to be like overshadowed or something, which is also an interesting concept, because you really don't know how it would have been perceived or continue to have been perceived throughout history. It's obviously very different now, looking at it like so far removed from everything. I do wonder how it would have performed though, had she have stayed alive, or had she have not gotten sick, and had she stayed alive and continued working on it. It's just, but yeah, so that's the book. That is The Tenant of Wildfell Hall by Anne Bronte. It's beautiful, 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 beautiful. And with that, my friends, I will end this casual classic, and I will see you on Thursday with another normal review, and I'll see you eventually on one of these Mondays with another classic. I think my next one is going to be Jane Austen, maybe something by her, or it might be The Great Gatsby, might be The Bell Jar, who knows. We'll see what I'm feeling. I appreciate you guys so much, every single one of you guys are phenomenal. Thanks for entertaining me in my classics obsession. I will talk to you in the next one. Bye.